little turnaround at the end of the day.
It did. Like the U-turn at the end of the proverbial dead cat bounce on Monday. What do you think? Are we at the point where you start buying a little bit of dip, slowly moving in?
I still think there's some air that has to come out of the pandemic-driven do-it-yourselfers, which really what Warren Buffett would, in his sidekick, we're talking about Robinhood. And the other thing I don't believe anyone is accounting for is, they're talking about interest rates holding in the context of, well, we're going to have a recession, they're going to go back down.
Thank you for making those calls. We now have 175 people. With your permission, we will waive the reading of the constable's return of the warrant. Welcome to the 2022 annual town meeting. The fire chief reminds us that there is no smoking in the building and no sitting in the aisles or in the stairs. In consideration of others and the important business before us, please place your cell phone in airline mode or turn it off. Throughout the auditorium tonight, and as you enter the building, you saw 20 or so residents with name tags and orange bibs on. These individuals have been designated by the town clerk to help ensure the smooth running of tonight's meeting. As the evening progresses, please follow their instructions when necessary. Non-voters and non-residents are welcome to attend our town meeting, but they should be seated in the area designated to my left or in the designated area in the cafeteria. Our guests tonight are going to include State Representative Denise Garlick. Thank you, Representative Garlick, for your service to Dover. Some introductions. I'm Jim Rapetti, the moderator for the town of Dover, and in that role, I will oversee tonight's proceedings. On your left, my right behind me, we have the Board of Directors, and if you could just give a quick wave as I call your name. John Jeffries, Chair, Robin Hunter, and Robert Springett. Our Town Administrator, Chris Dwelly, over in the corner there. Town Council, Nina Pickering-Cook, who's behind me, the podium. Assistant Moderator, David Havlin. And Town Clerk, Felicia Hoffman. On your right, my left, we have Rob Andrews, the Chair of the Warrant Committee, and Andrew Ursitti, the Vice Chair. Seated in the front row, we have the other members of the Warrant Committee, Peter Smith, Secretary, Sarah Cadena Kinney, Gordon Kinder, Melissa Herman, Cam Hudson, Janet McCormick, and Steve Migowski. A few words on procedure and tradition. The beginning of the Blue Book, which I hope you all have, summarizes the basic rules for town meeting, but let me emphasize a few key points. Before each article, I will state the subject matter of the article and then recognize a person to make a motion on the article. The full text of each of these articles is printed in the Blue Book, and in most cases, the Warrant Committee has included a summary of their position on the article in the Blue Book. If you wish to discuss a motion, you must be recognized by me before speaking. You will note 3 microphones in the front here. These microphones are marked yes if you wish to speak in favor of a motion, no if you wish to speak in opposition to a motion, and one has question marks if you simply wish to ask a question. If you wish to speak, please come down, line up, make sure you have a safe distance apart from people in front of you. And when it's your turn to speak at the microphone, it will be on. State your name and your address, and then state your position or ask your question. I will alternate among the microphones in front here. Also, I realize that some of you may not be able to come down and stand in line. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand, and we will have somebody bring you a microphone. I will alternate between those who aren't able to come down and those here based on the relative numbers in each group. As we hopefully exit from the pandemic for good, there is a lot of business to be brought before the town, and we have a lengthy warrant to discuss at this meeting. At the recommendation of a committee to study ways to streamline town meeting, I will limit persons presenting a motion to 8 minutes and comments from the floor to 2 minutes. Please try to limit your remarks to new facts and new perspectives. Repeating what has already been said is unlikely to help your case and indeed may hurt if people are anxious to vote on the question. The Assistant Town Moderator, Dave Havlin, will ring a bell on the stage once you have 30 seconds left and twice when your 2 minutes has expired. A further word about our conduct. Disagreement is the essence of democracy. It would be a very boring town meeting if we agreed about everything, but it is imperative that we disagree without being disagreeable. Let us honor the memory of all those who sacrificed to give us this great gift of democracy by conducting ourselves in a professional and congenial manner. Emotional outbursts or accusations directed toward individuals or groups have no place here, and in fact, they dishonor the memory of those who sacrificed to provide us this great gift of democracy. Before we proceed to the articles in the warrant, would you please join me in expressing our thanks to the scores of elected and appointed volunteers and town employees who comprise our town government. Freudian slip. Who comprise our town government, as well as the able employees who ensure the smooth running of our town. Tonight, I would like to remember Dover citizens and employees who have contributed to Dover's governance and passed away since the last annual town meeting. Paul Dalton, Joe Devine Jr., Craig Hughes, James Jacob J.J. Kaiser III, and Scott Wainwright. We mourn the passing of these individuals and are grateful for the difference they made in the life of our town. As I mentioned, democracy is a wonderful prize that has been preserved through the sacrifice and efforts of millions of our citizens. Let us take a moment to silently recognize those who are putting themselves in harm's way at this very moment in service of our country. A moment of silence, please. Thank you, and may God bless America. And now, if you would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Flag is over here in the corner. I pledge the allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to speak a moment now about the voting process. As was the case in the past few years, Felicia Hoffman, our town clerk, has worked very hard with turning technology to organize the distribution of response cards that you were issued as you entered the high school. When we have a vote, you will have 10 seconds to select key 1A for yes or key 2B for no. If your response card does not work during a vote, we ask that you please raise your hand and an attendant will assist you. We will now test the response cards by considering the following statement: tonight is a great night for a town meeting. When I give you the word, I will ask you to vote yes by pressing 1 or vote no by pressing 2. You may vote now. As you are voting, a small green light in the upper right of the response card will momentarily flash. You have 10 seconds to enter your choice, and you can vote as often as you like, but only your last vote will be registered. Now, if you don't see a green light, please raise your right hand. Is everybody's working? Oh, we have a gentleman here. Oh, you're working, okay. Okay, very good. Everybody, oh, we have 2 people here. Please keep your hand, and also somebody back there. Andre, there's somebody here on your left also. Jessica, can we try it again to see? Okay, let's try it again, and when I give you the word, please vote. 1 for yes, 2 for no. You may vote now. And again, as you're pressing the button, look for a green light to flash. That will indicate that your vote has been registered. Okay, did everybody's work? Any problems? Okay, very good. At this time, it is now customary to recognize the Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Jeffries. Mr. Jeffries.
Mr. Moderator, the Board of Selectmen would like to thank you, Assistant Moderator David Haviland, Town Clerk Felicia Hoffman, the Warrant Committee, thank the many citizens who selflessly donate their time and talent to the critical tasks which help us manage the town of Dover. Last year was a very difficult year, yet the town maintained its culture, retained its financial superiority, and prospered where other communities failed its citizens and taxpayers. 2 weeks ago, the Boston Globe named Dover the most desirable place to live in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. As a result of this designation, I was asked to appear on Bloomberg Radio last Friday. The very first question I was asked was, why is Dover so special? What makes Dover a better place to live than Weston and Wellesley? Yeah, being on the hot seat, live radio. My answer, Dover is committed to maintaining a way of life that has not changed in 60 years. Education, open space, financial independence, a small, efficient, superior management team, selfless citizens serving each other. For 30 minutes on live radio, the questions about Dover were not easy, but the answers were. The Board of Selectmen would like you all to please read the 2021 annual report, which Felicia made me sign out last week because they're brand new. And please dig into the details of your town. Finally, Mr. Moderator, regarding tonight's mask mandate, and the Board of Selectmen would like to thank all the citizens in attendance, both here inside the auditorium and the ones segregated out of the auditorium to the cafeteria. Mr. Moderator, as you have trademarked and copywritten, our duty is to disagree without being disagreeable. Like the citizens segregated out of this auditorium, some of us personally disagree with the mask mandate from the Board of Health. I point to last Tuesday's town meeting held by Sherburne in this very room without a mask mandate. However, out of respect for the citizens who fear COVID and the volunteers and staff and presenters of this meeting, it is more important that we sit here than it is to challenge this mandate. My personal feeling and something I share with all of you. Thank you all for your cooperation and your attendance this evening. Mr. Moderator?
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. Before we move to the articles on the warrant, it is customary to again recognize the chairman of the warrant committee, Rob Andrews, for a motion governing the conduct of the meeting. I call upon Mr. Andrews, chair of the warrant committee, to make this customary motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the following rule be adopted for the conduct of this meeting. Any amendment to a main motion that would increase an appropriation must contain a provision for the source of funds for the increase such that the total amount to be raised and appropriated at the meeting will not be increased.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ursitti. Motion has been made that if there is an increase in funding that's requested as part of an amendment to a motion, that it has to identify the source of funding. Is there any discussion on this motion? Okay. When I give you the signal, you may press 1 to vote yes, or 2 to no. You may vote now. Motion carries 154 yes, 6 no. Okay, now if you have your blue book, if you turn towards the back of it, there's an article, Article 27, that involves a discussion of climate change. And Mr. Jeffries is going to make a few comments about this motion, and then we're going to consider a motion to dismiss. Mr. Jeffries.
Mr. Moderator, John Jeffries, Chairman, Board of Selectmen. Mr. Moderator, the Board of Selectmen, together with the students and Mrs. Dawn Frattori, known to most of us as our regional schools business manager, and the mentor of the students presenting this article, discussed the goals of both reducing the length of town meeting while recognizing the merits of this article, the need to address climate change, and using tonight to recognize the initiative of these students. We felt, in keeping with the goals and objectives of this meeting and of the town, it would be proper to recognize the initiative of these young students. They are at least one, maybe two, depending upon if the game outside completed or not, are with us. Dawn Frattori, would you like to come down with Angela Lynn, who's here, just to recognize the students, and if she's with the other students?
We thank you for your interest in the town and also your interest in this very important subject. And we also appreciate your willingness to accommodate us in order that we may expedite this meeting. Don, would you like to make the motion?
Sure. Just to recognize Angela Lynn, is the co-chair of the committee, and I make a motion to dismiss.
Okay, a motion has been made to dismiss Article 27. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, when I give you the word, you'll be able to vote on this. Yes, if you're in favor of dismissal, press 1. If you're opposed to dismissal, press 2. And thank you very much for your efforts. Thank you. It's not open yet. I'll give you the word. Hang on a second. You may vote now. 1 for yes, 2 for no. Motion carries 144 to 31. Thank you. Okay, now if you turn to Article 1, page 28 of your blue book, this article deals with hearing or acting on committee reports. Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the reading of the various reports by the town clerk be waived and the reports be accepted and placed on file.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti, for seconding. Is there any discussion on this motion to hear or act on committee reports? Okay, hearing no discussion, we'll move to a vote. Please press 1 for yes now or 2 for no. Motion carries 149 to 12. Okay, now we move to Article 2, which is on page 29 of your blue book. It's to establish salaries for elected officials for the fiscal year 2023 on page 29. Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the salaries recommended for elected officials of the town as shown in the right-hand column of the warrant committee report be called over by the moderator, and that if no objection is raised to any of them, they be approved as read.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. If this motion, Mr. Rossetti has seconded. If this motion carries, I will read the salaries for the various positions on page 29 in the right-hand column of the blue book. And if no one objects or states hold, all of these salaries will be deemed to have been approved. So right now you're voting on allowing me to call these salaries out. And after I call them, if nobody has objected, they will be deemed to have been approved. So first, authorizing me to call these salaries out and ask if there are any holds or objections. I'll give you the word to vote on this motion in a second. And if you're in favor of the motion, you'll press 1 for yes, 2 for no. And you may vote now. Motion carries 167 to 12. Okay, so I've been now authorized to read over the salaries that are listed on page 29. If anybody has a question or a hold, please yell out, hold, and we'll revisit that particular item. If there are no holds, then all of these will be deemed to have been approved. Okay, number 1, Board of Selectmen. Chairman, now I'm looking at the right-hand column for fiscal year 23, 200. Clerk, 130.
50.
I'm sorry, clerk, 150. I'm going to have to take my glasses off. Clerk, 150. Other member, 100. Chairman for the Board of Assessors, 400. Other members, 350. Town clerk, $85,644. Planning Board, Chairman, 100. Other members each, 50. Constables, 3 each, 150. Board of Health, Chairman, 150. Other members each, 100. I did not hear any holds. Did anybody else hear any holds? Okay, all these items are deemed to have been approved then. Thank you. Article 3, which is on page 30 of your blue book, involves the authorization of revolving funds. Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Moderator, I move that pursuant to the provisions of Section 516 Finances of the General Bylaws of the Town of Dover, that the town authorize the following board and department revolving fund limits. Building Department, Gas Inspector, $12,350. Plumbing Inspector, $22,050. Wiring Inspector, $34,500. And the Board of Health, Perk and Deep Hole Inspection and Permitting, $40,000. Septic Inspection and Permitting, $50,000. Well Inspection and Permitting, $20,000. Swimming Pool Inspection and Permitting, $10,000. Library, Materials Replacement, $5,000. Council on Aging, Senior Activities and Transportation, $35,000. Recycling Committee, Material Sales Proceeds, $4,000. And further, that the fees charged for these services be credited to their respective accounts, and that the aforementioned boards or departments be authorized to make expenditures from the respective accounts and for their respective purposes up to the amount set forth above.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. Is there any discussion on this motion, which again is described on page 30 of your blue book? So your hand over here. Would you like to come down, or we can bring a microphone to you? A woman in the red sweater. Could you raise your hand, please? Well, ma'am, hang on a second. Let me bring a microphone up to you. Can somebody bring a microphone up to her? I'm going to ask you to state your name and address for the record, ma'am. Keep going. She's standing up, Bill, behind the railing there.
Thank you. My name is Ida Hayes, and I live at 18 Meadowbrook Road. I just have a question. Are these part-time positions? The gas inspector, the plumbing inspector, the wiring inspector, and the Board of Health?
Could you pass the microphone down or to Chris? I'm passing the microphone down to our town administrator, Chris Dwelly.
Thank you. These aren't necessarily positions. They're an accounting mechanism for the fees generated by the particular service within them. to pay for the contractors or the employees that provide that service.
Oh, so it's not for the actual gas inspector?
So in that particular instance, that revolving fund, the fees that are taken in for gas inspections do pay the costs for the gas inspector.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hayes. Any other questions? Okay, when I give you the signal, you'll press 1 to vote yes, or 2 if you're opposed. You may vote now. Motion carries 171 to 7. Article 4, which deals with the appropriation for fiscal year 2023 for our operating budget. Article 4 begins on the bottom of page 30 of your blue book and extends all the way to page 40. I will now ask Mr. Andrews to make a motion with respect to the town operating budget. And then, as part of our discussion with respect to the motion, I will ask Mr. Andrews to discuss the town budget before we vote on the motion. Mr. Andrews.
Thank you. Mr. Arsetti is going to make the presentation, but I'll read the motion. Mr. Moderator, I move that the salaries and expenses recommended by the departments, offices, boards, and committees of the town as shown in the FY23 requested columns in the warrant committee report be called over by the moderator, and if no objection is made, that to meet these appropriations, the town raise such amounts for the tax levy and other general revenues of the town, and transfer the following sums: $100,000 from overlay surplus, $531,982 in MSBA reimbursements, and $880,000 from free cash.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. So a motion has been made to consider the town budget. I will now ask call upon Mr. Andrews to present the warrant committee's discussion of the town budget. Mr. Andrews.
Thank you. I'm going to recognize Mr. Arsetti to do the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Just like to present a brief overview of the operating budget, really with respect to changes from FY22 to FY23. The moderator is going to, subsequent to this, read through the individual line items of that budget. So we won't really touch on the... Okay, thank you. We won't really touch on each individual line now, as it would be repetitive in the interest of brevity, as requested by the moderator. So for the highlights, the operating budget for FY23 is up overall about 6% from the FY22 budget. The schools, both the Dover schools and primarily Dover Sherburne Regional School, but the other compacts that we're in as well, make up 57% of that budget, and those line items are up in total about 2%. So the remainder of town government that makes up the other 43% of the budget is increasing 13% over the prior year. And that is driven by really just one primary driver and then a couple of other things that you'll notice as you go through the individual line items in the Blue Book. The largest of those items, about 2/3 of the total increase from year to year, is driven by debt and interest service, primarily reflective of the Carroll debt that's been taken on for the Carroll Community Center renovations. The remainder of the items, and that number is about $1.4 million. The remainder of the items are driven by, you have police department salaries, and there is a statewide requirement, the Police Reform Act, that's driving those costs. They're up about 12%, or $265,000. There's a general government increase of $186,000 that's composed of several smaller items. There's a highway union collective bargaining agreement that the town has reserved for in that budget. There is an application for the town's electronic systems that engage better with the town residents. And then there's third-party costs for planning that really make up the lion's share of that. And you have approximately $100,000 at the Board of Health, which is the addition of 2 positions in that area. After those items, The remainder of the town government budget is up about 1.6%. So those are your primary drivers from year to year. And with that, I will turn it back to the moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. Before we move to consider the motion to allow me to call over the items in the budget, are there any questions for Mr. Rossetti? Okay, so the motion has been made that I call over the items that begin on page 31 of your blue book. And if anybody has a question or objects to one of the items, they should state hold, and we'll come back and revisit that particular item. So right now, you're voting on the authorization for me to call out these items, and if there is no hold, those items will be deemed to have been approved. I'll give you the sign. You may vote now. 1 for yes, 2 for no. Motion carries 167 to 9. So now I'm going to be calling over the items that begin on page 31. If you look at page 31, you'll note that there are 3 items on the right-hand column of the page by the margin. The first item in that grouping of 3 says FY 2023. Those are the amounts that are being requested for each line item that I'll begin. So we'll start with moderator 3, number 301, moderator 0. We're off to a good start. 131, Warrant Committee, $7,680. Reserve Fund number 132, $250,000. 122, Selectmen, total, $625,408. 192, Townhouse Expenses, $56,056. Number 191, Whiting Road, $7,000. Number 193, Carroll Community Center, $86,484. Okay, we have a hold on 193 Carroll Community Center. Number 199, Building Maintenance, total, $334,421. Number 129, Copy Postage, $26,900. Number 151, Law, $200,000. Now going to the next page, page 32. Number 135, Town Accountant, $215,651. Sorry. Number 135, Town Accountant, total, $263,951. Number 141, Assessor, total, $213,414. Number 145, Treasurer Collector, total, $289,769. 155, Data Processing, total, $270,588. 161, Town Clerk, total, $96,769. 162, Election Registration, total, $62,587. 175, Planning Board, total, $157,616. I've been told that return to 162, election registration total, $65,287. 175 Planning Board, $157,616. Engineering, number 411, total, $97,300. On to the next grouping, Protection of Persons Property. Number 201, Police, total, $2,401,340. Going to the next page, number 299, Protective Agency Building, $79,023. 292, Animal Control, total, $27,672. I'm sorry, $25,672. I'm having a hard time with the light here. I apologize. Spotlight here. Number 220, Fire, total, $630,426. Number 231, Ambulance, total, $274,891. Number 241, building inspector, total $164,686. Number 291, emergency management, total $602. 171, conservation commission, total $150,128. 176, board of appeals, total $4,399. Number 294, care of trees, total $113,313. 295, tree committee, total $2,500. On to the next page, page 36. Health and sanitation, number 433, garbage disposal. I'm guessing that's zero, is that correct? Okay. Garbage disposal is zero. 439, solid waste, total $367,866. Number 450, town water, total $30,003. 519, Board of Health, total $242,062. I'm sorry, $245,62. Thank you. 422, maintenance for highways and bridges, at the bottom of page 36, total $835,579. Number 423, snow and ice, total $420,000. 424, street lighting, $8,899. 425, town garage, $71,308. Tarvia and patching, number 428, $275,000. Now on to other public agencies. Number 194, energy coordinator, 0. Number 491, cemetery, $129,206. Number 541, council on aging, $229,970. Number 610, going to the top of page 38, library, total $844,500. Number 650, parks and recreation, total $466,717. On to unclassified services. Number 152, personnel committee, 0. Number 178, Dover Housing Partnership, 0. Number 195, town report, $6,125. Number 543, veterans, $2,000. Number 691, historical commission, $1,250. Number 692, Memorial Day celebration, $3,000. Insurance, number 912, workers' compensation, $118,543. Number 914, group insurance, $2,594,465. Number 916, Medicare FICA, $190,000. Number 950, other insurance, $221,478.78. Next category for pensions, number 911, Norfolk County Retirement, $1,585,077. Schools, number 600, Dover School Operating Budget, $10,369,791. Number 601, Dover's share of the regional operating assessment, total $12,959,396. Next page, page 40, top of the page, number 602, Minuteman Vocational, $197,427. Number 604, Norfolk County Agricultural High School, $24,572. Next category, maturing debt and interest, number 710, maturing debt and principal, $1,670,000. Number 751, maturing debt interest, $671,753. Number 759, bank charges, $4 million. Oh, I'm sorry, $4,000. And I don't work for the bank. Yeah, yes. Okay, so total budget, grand total, $41,438,610.78. Now, I heard a hold on number 193. Were there any other holds? Okay, so all these, if there are no other holds, then all the other items are deemed approved. Okay, so all the other items are deemed approved. We will now go back to 193. And I'll first ask Mr. Andrews to make a motion with respect to line item number 193, which is asking for a total of $86,484 for the Carroll Community Center. Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Moderator, I move that $86,484 be raised and appropriated for the Carroll Community Center.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded with respect to the Carroll Community Center. Now, it's the person who said hold, would you like to come up here? And thank you, ma'am. If you could state your name and your address, please. I'm speaking to the microphone.
Sierra Bright, Smith Street. I just have a question. Why are we spending $86,000 if the Carroll Community Center is going to be completely changed and other money is already appropriated for that?
Oh, okay, very good. Who would like to respond to that question? Mr. Dwelly?
Sure. While the community center building is being demolished and construction proceeds, we had to find temporary location for the two offices that were within the building, the Park and Recreation Department, as well as the Council on Aging. Park and Recreation has relocated to the highway garage, and the Council on Aging has temporarily relocated to the townhouse. That said, they both run programs throughout the year, and we do not have programming space for them to continue to run programs. So the monies that is in the Carroll Community Center line item would pay for those two departments to be able to lease and rent space while the new building is constructed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dwelly. Ma'am, does that answer your question? Yes. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions with respect to this motion for the Carroll Center? Okay, so if you're in favor of the motion to fund the Carroll Community Center, you'll press 1 for yes. You may vote now, or press 2 for no if you're opposed. Okay, motion carries 168 to 19. On to Article 5, which is on page 41 of your blue book, and deals with the appropriation for fiscal year 2023 of the capital budget. Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the capital budget items recommended by the Capital Budget Committee, as shown in the Warrant Committee report, be called over by the moderator, and if no objection is made, that to meet these appropriations, the town appropriates such sums in part by raising from the tax levy and in part by the transfer from the following accounts: $580,914 from free cash, $118,051.45 from Article 5, Item 3A, Protective Agencies Building Roof Replacement as voted on at the 2019 Annual Town Meeting, and $13,050.35 from Article 5, Item 3C, Protective Agencies Building HVAC Replacement as voted at the 2019 Annual Town Meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Rossetti has seconded the motion, which will ask me to call over the items beginning on page 41 of the blue book. Same drill as what we've done before. If you have a question or objection with respect to a particular item, please state hold, and we'll come back and consider that item separately. If there are no holds stated with respect to an item, then that item will be deemed to have been approved. You are now voting on authorizing me to call over the list. So when I give you the word, if you're in favor of this motion, press 1 for yes, 2 for no. You may vote now. Motion carries 176 to 6. Okay, I just want to alert the members behind me that I'm going to be following the order in the blue book, not in the motion that's written or in your cheat sheets, because otherwise the audience would not be able to follow the numbers here. So the first item is at the top of page 41, and it's for the Dover School Department, Chickering School. is for flooring in classrooms, $120,000. The next item halfway down the page is for the emergency management system, $49,500. Energy management. Let me take my glasses off. I'm going to have to wear sunglasses. Energy management system, $49,500. Turning the page to page 42, C, cold water booster system, $17,000. Moving to item 2, highway department. A, 3.5 metric ton mini excavator, $63,000. Moving to the top of page 43, fire department. A, repeater and radio equipment, $115,365. Number 4, Parks and Recreation Department. A, F-450 dump truck, $65,000. Moving to page 44, number 5 for the Police Department. A, patrol vehicle, $53,000. Okay, hold on. 5A, Police Department, patrol vehicle. Thank you. 5B, firearms, at the bottom of page 44, $23,500. Did I hear a hold on that? No, okay. 6A, from the Board of Selectmen, 6A, townhouse, replace fire alarm, $56,000. B, townhouse, additional funds for windows, $250,000. Okay, so we have a hold also on 6B, windows. Turning the page to page 46 to C, townhouse office renovation, $400,000. D, protective services building, Sallyport, $25,000. Going to page 47, E, protective services building, renovate bathrooms, $35,000. Library, main HVAC system, I'm sorry? Was there a hold with respect to E? No, okay. F, library, main HVAC system, $90,000. All right, hold on HVAC system. So that's a hold on 6F. Okay, now to page 48. 7, Dover-Sherburne Regional School. Dover's share, roof restoration, middle school, gym, and Lindquist Commons, $872,393. Okay, and that's it. I have heard holds with respect to 5A, 6B, and 6F. 5A on page 44. Okay, so so far, okay, we have holds 5A with respect to the patrol vehicle, 6B, which is on page 45 with respect to funds for townhouse windows, and 6F, which is on page 47 with respect to the library main HVAC system for $90,000. We'll have to consider each of these separately, so I'm going to first ask Ms. Andrews to make a motion with respect to 5A, the patrol vehicle.
I move that we raise $53,000 for the patrol vehicle.
Okay, do I hear a second? Second. Okay, motion has been made and seconded that we appropriate $53,000 funds to purchase a patrol vehicle. Now, a person who said hold, would you like to come up here and address the town? And again, ma'am, please state your name and your address.
Sierra Bright, Smith Street. I'm just wondering if an electric vehicle has been considered. I've done a little bit of research, and electric vehicles should last 3 years longer than the standard ICE vehicles, combustion engine, and they have much less maintenance costs. I understand that they pay for themselves in 18 months, $12,000. They cost $12,000 more, but their maintenance saves $6,000 a year. So I'm wondering if that's been considered, and if not, why not?
Okay, thank you. And who would like to address that? Chris, or should I ask the chief?
I think the chief would be the best.
Chief, do you mind addressing that question?
It's Chair of Capital Budget, Certainly.
Oh, and also Barry. Barry, would you like to address it?
Chief McGowan from the Police Department. With the Capital Budget Committee, we explored electric vehicles both last year and this year. We looked at the models that would be similar to the vehicles that we're running now. They do not offer a fully electric vehicle other than a Ford pickup truck, and it's the first model year, and there's no guarantee that it'll be available to us this year. The committee and I decided it would be best to put this off at least a year until we have an idea of how the pickup truck, the fully electric pickup truck will run. The costs are a little more than $12,000 more, and we won't see that full realization of that half of maintenance until the third year. Is there anything else, guys? Did I get everything?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Barry, would you like to add anything to that? Okay. Any further discussion on the appropriation for the patrol vehicle? If you're in favor of appropriating funds to purchase a patrol vehicle, please press 1 for yes, 2 for no. You may vote now. Motion carries 162 to 28. The second item was item 6B, which is on page 45 of your blue book, and dealt with townhouse additional funds for windows. Person who said hold for that, please.
Me again. I'm wondering, Sierra Bright, 55 Smith Street. Wondering if any consideration was made to preserving the windows that have lasted 100 years already, as opposed to buying windows that are only warranted for 10 years and have an expectancy of 20 years. That doesn't seem like a good trade-off to me if we're going to be going through this big expense again in possibly less than 20 years. The existing windows have done such a great job restoring them. We'll never get this classic look with a vinyl-sided window. And I imagine they can be retrofitted to be double-paned. I'm all in favor of that, but I just think it's a mistake to buy some new windows because they won't look as nice and they won't last as long.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And before I ask for further discussion, let me ask Mr. Andrews to make a motion with respect to 6B.
Mr. Moderator, I move that we raise $250,000 for the windows, additional funds for the windows in the townhouse.
Okay, thank you. And second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. Barry, do you wish to comment on this as well?
Chair of the Capital Budget Committee. We did consider repairing the windows, but we found that because of the age, they're the original 1923 windows, that it was probably impossible to properly repair them. And we could not get the insulation values and the energy savings that we could from new windows. So we brought in some window experts, and they gave us windows that are very attractive, look the same, and provide double insulation, and will reduce the heat loss by approximately 30 to 40%. Therefore, over the 20-year period, they basically pay for themselves by savings and efficiency. And they cut down on drafts and the uncomfortable drafts that the employees have to put up with.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any further discussion with respect to this motion concerning windows? No further discussion. If you're in favor of the appropriation, press 1 for yes or 2 for no. When I give you a signal, you may vote now. Motion carries 163 to 31. Next item for which there was a hold was 6F, the library main HVAC system. It's referred to on the bottom of page 47. Before I ask for a discussion, Mr. Andrews, could you make a motion for the appropriation of $90,000 for that system?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, I move that we raise $90,000 for the library main HVAC system.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, motion has been made and seconded that we appropriate $90,000 for the library main HVAC system. Person who said hold, could you please? Name and address, I'm sorry.
Sierra Bright, Smith Street. It sounds as though only the lower level is being scheduled to take a look at a heat pump system, and I'm wondering why the whole building isn't scheduled for that if
Okay.
all the systems are being replaced.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Barry, would you like to respond to that? Thank you.
There are two levels of the library, and they're both different systems. The upper level can be converted rather easily to heat pumps and operate at much higher efficiency than the present system, which was originally installed, I think, in 1985 or 1986. The lower level is a much more complicated system, which involves a boiler and also other kinds of condensers. So we thought that it would be best to study the lower level at a later date, especially when we can apply for green community grants for the lower level.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any further discussion with respect to the library main HVAC system? Okay, yes, ma'am, come on down.
So the way I read the Blue Book, it sounds as though the upper level is not going to be eligible for a heat pump. But what Barry was just saying sounds as though the upper level is definitely going to be heat pump and they're just studying the lower level. Is that true?
Barry, could you?
Yes. It says that the HVAC main unit that provides all upstairs heat and air conditioning. So it would be a heat pump that would replace the existing system.
Okay. Does that answer your question, ma'am? Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, so now the motion is that we appropriate $90,000 for the library main HVAC system. Again, if you're in favor of this, press 1. If you're opposed, press 2. You may vote now. Motion carries 174 to 15. Okay, with respect to item 7A, which is on page 48 of your Blue Book, Council has advised that we should table consideration of this until Article 13. So I'm going to ask someone to make a motion to table 7A until we consider Article 13. Robin, could you?
So moved.
Okay, so a motion has been made to table the item 7A until consideration of Article 13. Do I hear a second?
Second.
And the motion has been seconded. Any discussion on this? Okay. Jessica, when you're ready, if you're in favor of the motion to table until Article 13, press 1 for yes, 2 for no. You may vote now. The motion carries 183 to 4, which is more than 2/3. Okay, on to the next article. Okay, Article 6. Now, in an effort to try to shorten the meeting tonight, we're going to combine our considerations of Articles 6, 8, and 9. All three of these articles involve the same questions every year, the same amounts. Article 6, which is at the bottom of page 48, asks for an appropriation for unemployment compensation fund, amount we request every year. Article 8, which is on page 49, pertains to road construction and reconstruction and improvements. And Article 9, which is also on page 49, pertains to the appropriation of funds to for the Conservation Fund. This motion is going to ask you to allow me to call over each of those motions. And if there is no objection or hold, each of those three items will be deemed to have been approved. So now, if I could ask Mr. Andrews to make that motion.
Mr. Moderator, I move that Articles 6, 8, 9 be called over by the moderator, and if no objection is made, that the town approve them.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. So the motion has been made that I call over the items that are entitled Articles 6, 8, and 9. Article 6 begins at the bottom of page 48 and carries over to the top of page 49. The title is Appropriation for Unemployment Compensation Fund, and it asks that we raise and appropriate $10,000 to fund the Unemployment Compensation Fund. Are there any holds with respect to that? Article 8 is on page 49 of your blue book and pertains to the appropriation of funds for road construction, reconstruction, and improvements. Article 8 actually is not requesting any funds be appropriated, but it does authorize the Board of Selectmen to apply for state aid. Any holds for Article 8? Article 9 is titled Appropriate Funds to the Conservation Fund. This article begins at the bottom of page 49 and carries over to the top of page 50. It relates to the Conservation Fund. It requests that we appropriate $25,000. Are there any holds for that? Okay, no holds. Okay, I now would ask for a motion to vote on this. We had a motion for me to call over the items. All those in favor of me calling over the items, please press 1 for yes or 2 for no. We may vote now. Motion carries 184 to 3. Now, again, I called all the items. Let me just do it again to make sure. Article 6, page 48, page 49, asking for $10,000 for unemployment. Article 8, page 49, authorizing the Board of Selectmen to seek state aid. And Article 9, Conservation Fund, $25,000. Again, are there any holds? Okay, no holds, then these are deemed to be approved. On to the next article, on to Article 7. And again, in order to save time, we're going to now consider several articles that the sponsors have asked us to dismiss. And the articles that they have asked us to dismiss are, the sponsors are Articles 7, 11, 14, 17, 19, 20, 23, and 26. And I'll be coming back to those, reading them out and describing them more in detail in a second. The motion now that I'm asking for is to allow me to call over those articles, and if nobody says hold or objects as I read through the articles, they will be deemed to have been dismissed. We're doing this in order to try to expedite the meeting. So now I will ask Mr. Andrews.
Yep, Mr. Moderator, I move that Articles 7, 11, 14, 17, 19, 20, 23, and 26 be called over by the moderator, and if no objection is made, that the town dismiss them.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. Again, this is... sorry? I'm not moving to a vote yet. What was the number you read? Yeah, that's right. It's 17, 19, 20, 23, and 26. Yeah, that should be removed. Okay, you got 19, okay. So it's 7, 11, 14, 17, 19, 20, 23, and 26. Why don't you give me the motion again, Mr. Andrews?
I move that Articles 7, 11, 14, 17, 19, 20, 23, and 26 be called over by the moderator, and if no objection is made, that the town dismiss them.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rossetti?
Second.
Okay, so a motion is made and seconded that we call over these items. And if you're in favor of authorizing me to call over the items, I would ask you to vote yes. If you're opposed, to vote no. Press 1 for yes, 2 for no, and you may vote now. Motion carries 175 to 11. Now, the first article that we are voting on to be dismissed is Article 7, which is on page 49 of your blue book. Its sponsor, the Board of Selectmen, have asked that the article be dismissed, and it pertains to appropriation of funds for sick leave for retiring police officers. Are there any questions or holds with respect to dismissing Article 7? Okay, next item is Article 11. It's on page 50 of your blue book, and it pertains to appropriations for the Capital Stabilization Fund. Again, Article 11 on page 50 of your blue book. Its sponsor, again, the Board of Selectmen, have asked that this article be dismissed. Any holds or questions? Article 14 is on page 52 of your blue book, and it pertains to borrowing to pay for Dover-Sherburne Regional School District capital expenditures. Its sponsor, the Dover-Sherburne Regional School Committee, has asked that it be dismissed. The next item is Article 17 on page 53. It entails supplemental appropriations to Article 4 of the 2021 annual town meeting. Its sponsor, the Warrant Committee, has asked that this article be dismissed. Next item is Article 19 on page 54 of your blue book, and it pertains to the floodplain district. Its sponsor, the Planning Board, has asked that it be dismissed. Article 20 is on pages 55 to 57 of your blue book, and it relates to bridle paths. Its sponsor, the Planning Board, has asked that it be dismissed. Okay, hold on Article 20. Article 23, page 58, pertains to amendments involving sign bylaws. Its sponsor, the Planning Board, has asked that it be dismissed. And lastly, Article 26, on page 60, pertains to the appropriation for the acquisition of land at Hale Reservation. Its sponsor, the Board of Selectmen, have asked that it be dismissed because they're planning on a special town meeting to consider that item. Are there any holds other than with respect to our Article 20? We have a hold on Article 20. Are there holds for any of the other articles? Okay, consistent with the desires of the sponsors, those articles are deemed to be dismissed. We now turn to Article 20. Mr. Andrews, if I could have a motion that we consider a vote to dismiss Article 20.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, I move that Article 20 be dismissed.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to dismiss Article 20, which pertains to bridle paths. Person who had a hold, would you like to come down, sir? Or ma'am? And thank you. If you could state your name and address, please.
Tara Nolan, Cranberry Lane. That article, I think, is sort of a cleanup of administrative sort of failure to do it in the past, and I didn't know what the reason was to not get caught up on that.
Okay, thank you for your question, ma'am. If I could ask Ms. Lisbon to respond to that? Chair of the Planning Board. Thank you, Carol.
Carol Lisbon, 2 Cross Street. It's come to our attention that the communication with the various property owners that had some of these easements did not really suffice to answer questions that they had. Because this is really a housekeeping article and doesn't have any operational impact on the town, we felt out of respect for the concerns of some of the property owners that we dismiss this article this year, meet with the property owners to better address their questions, and bring this back to town meeting after we've had those discussions.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, so the motion has been made that Article 20 be dismissed, and it's been seconded. No further discussion. I'll ask you to vote. All in favor, press 1 for yes, 2 for no. You may vote now. Motion carries 176 to 15. So article is deemed to have been dismissed. Okay, now we can skip up to Article 10, Appropriation Funds for General Stabilization Fund. It's on page 50 of your blue book. Page 50. Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town appropriate and transfer from free cash the sum of $149,553 to the General Stabilization Fund authorized by Chapter 40, Section 5B of the Massachusetts General Laws.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. This requires a 2/3 vote, and again, it's asking that we appropriate and transfer from free cash the sum of $149,553 to the General Stabilization Fund. Are there any questions or comments on this? Okay, hearing none, let's move to a vote. This is a 2/3 vote. When I give you the signal, vote press 1 for yes, 2 for no. You may vote now. Yeah, you may vote now. Motion carries 167 to 16, which is more than 2/3. Thank you. Okay, now on to Article 12. Which is on page 51 of your blue book. And it pertains to appropriation of funds for the Dover-Sherburne Regional District OPEB Stabilization Fund. Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town appropriate and transfer from free cash the sum of $700,000 to the Dover-Sherburne Regional School District OPEB Stabilization Fund, authorized by Chapter 40, Section 5B of Massachusetts General Laws.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. This is also a 2/3 vote. Is there any discussion or any questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to a vote on this. If you're in favor of this motion, you will press 1 for yes, 2 for no. Jessica, we may vote now. Thank you. Motion carries by more than 2/3, 169 to 11. Okay, we're now moving to Article 13. You'll recall that we had tabled consideration of capital expenses for the Dover-Sherburne Regional Schools. So first I'll ask for a motion to take that consideration off the table so that we may consider it. Could I have a motion?
Move to remove Article 13?
No, sir. Remove from prior consideration the appropriation for the Dover-Sherburne Regional School capital expense.
For prior consideration for the Dover-Sherburne Regional School.
Thank you. Do I hear a second? Second. Okay. If you're in favor of now considering the capital expenses in connection with Article 13, you will vote yes. If you're opposed, you'll vote no. Jessica, will you give me a signal? So you may vote now, 1 for yes, 2 for no. Okay, motion to take it off the table carries 164 to 14. So now we move to the consideration of that item in connection with Article 13, which is on pages 51 to 52 of your blue book. Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town appropriate the sum of $872,393 for the purpose of paying the town's share of the cost of various items of capital equipment and/or building improvements, including the payment of all the costs incidental and related thereto at the Dover-Sherborne Regional School District, the district, pursuant to an intergovernmental agreement with the district and the town of Sherborne, and to meet with this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow $872,393 under the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7, as amended, and transfer $196,288 from free cash for the payment of the debt service and underwriting costs on such borrowing.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. Okay, this is a 2/3 vote. Is there any discussion or are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question, Sierra Bright, Smith Street. I have a question about the roof. Will it be solar compatible? And also, will there be the addition of any insulation? I understand that buildings, the Lindquist Commons at least, has no insulation in the walls or the ceiling, and it seems as though when you're getting a new roof would be a good time to start addressing that problem.
Okay, thank you. Barry, would you like to respond to that question? I'm sorry, Barry, I'm making you get up so much for this meeting, but thank you for your service.
There is some insulation that will be replaced. Part of the building is insulated, and there are some leakage locations where all of that insulation will be replaced. Does that answer you?
Ma'am, could you come down to the microphone, please? I'm sorry. Otherwise, people won't be able to hear you.
How thick is that insulation going to be? And also, is the new roof going to be solar compatible?
The insulation is 3 inches to 6 inches thick, depending on what was there before. And the building will be able to be fitted with solar panels. So it is compatible with solar.
Why such a small amount of insulation? Why not just really save a lot of money with fuel and save the world at the same time?
Oh, go ahead. Dawn's there.
Hi, Dawn Vittori, the school administrator. So we're actually doing a roof restoration. So we're not taking off the existing roof. We're covering over what's already there. So there is insulation there, but we're not pulling up the existing roof in order to have the ability to put new insulation. But we have insulation in all of our buildings that are substantial to cover any excess exhausting of air or, energy going out. So I'm not saying that well, but we are not opening up the rooftop to enable us to be able to do any kind of overhaul insulation in these 3 buildings. Except where there's repairs. And we are not planning on putting solar on these 3 particular roofs. If you do an aerial overview, they are full of HVAC equipment. So it's not a surface that is going to be a good candidate for rooftop solar.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you also for your service. I don't know how you keep all these details straight. Thank you. Okay, so Any further questions with respect to Article 13? Okay, let's move to a vote. If you're in favor of the appropriation, you will press 1 for yes on my signal, 2 for no. You may vote now. Motion carries by more than 2/3, 178 to 13. On to Article 15. Article 15 is on page 52 of your blue book. It pertains to the appropriation of funds for one-time projects. Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town appropriate and transfer from free cash the sum of $250,000 for capital infrastructure needs.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. Are there any questions with respect to the appropriation of $250,000 from free cash for one-time projects? Okay, no questions, no discussion. Let's move to a vote. If you're in favor, press 1 for yes on my signal, press 2 for no. You may vote now. Motion carries 180 to 7. On to Article 16, which is on page 53 of your blue book. It involves the appropriation of funds for unpaid bills for prior years. This requires a 4/5 vote. It's approving bills to be paid from prior fiscal years. Mr. Andrews.
I move that the sum of $1,314.75 be transferred from free cash for the purpose of paying the following unpaid bills. Cemetery, Auto Plus, $201.67. Collector Treasurer, J. Brady, Deputy Tax Collector, $725. Council on Aging, Nan Veda, $388.08.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. Motion has been made to pay these unpaid bills from prior years. Are there any questions or discussion? This is a 4/5 vote. On my signal, if you're in favor, press 1 for yes, 2 for no. You may vote now. Motion carries 190 to 1. Article 17 was dismissed in the, I'm sorry? Which is by more than 4/5, council has advised me. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we dismissed Article 17, so now we're now on to Article 18, which deals with accessory apartments. And hang on a second, let me get the page number for you here. So it begins at the bottom of page 53 and carries over to the top of page 54. Article 18. Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Moderator, I move that Article 18 be dismissed.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. Motion has been made to dismiss Article 18. Ms. Lisman, would you like to comment on this?
Thank you. I do have a statement to read on behalf of the Planning Board. The Planning Board voted to withdraw Article 18 in mid-April. Upon consultation with the Zoning Board of Appeals and Town Council, we determined that the bylaw amendment draft needs further review and due diligence by Town Council, the Planning Board, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. As examples, there are issues around the special permit granting authority, the maximum size of ADUs, definition consistency with Dover's bylaws and Mass General Law, and the mixing of items in the current draft that requires 50% approval and those that require 2/3 approval at town meeting. The Planning Board was ready to present an amendment to our current bylaw 185-43 at the town meeting in May 2020, but due to COVID, the town meeting articles were reduced to only include those necessary for the continued functioning of the town, basically the financial articles. In preparation for the May 2021 town meeting, a legally required public hearing was scheduled, but it ended up not being held due to Zoom problems, and there was no time to legally schedule another public hearing. Since then, the bylaw has been tweaked, and a review process fell short. This was not an easy decision for us. It was a painful decision, and we are sorry we have to make it. We know that even though we have a current bylaw that allows accessory apartments, its applicability to only buildings constructed prior to 1986 is limiting and problematic. We know how important it is to families in Dover to have housing options for loved ones and caregivers, to give options to those who wish to downsize but remain in Dover, and to those who need extra income to remain in Dover. But we are also obligated to present to you a bylaw that passes legal muster at the local level and by the State Attorney's General Office, which reviews all bylaws passed at all town meetings in the Commonwealth, and one that reflects consideration of all the specific issues, both supportive and problematic, that are raised by ADUs. The Planning Board is totally committed to getting before town voters an ADU bylaw that reflects the best approach to ADUs for Dover. As of tomorrow morning, it is the #1 priority of the Planning Board. We look forward to presenting to you a carefully constructed update to the current bylaw at Dover's next town meeting. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Are there any questions or further discussion with respect to dismissing this article? Okay, raise your hand, please. No, sir, where are you? Raise your hand. Okay, let us bring a microphone up to you.
So when will the town be able to vote on it? Will
Sir,
that
could
be-
you state your name and address,
My name
please?
is Michael Warren, 31 Walpole Street. So when will the town vote on it? Next year at this time?
Okay, Carol?
So, as I said, this is going to be our #1 priority. We hope to get on it very quickly and hope that it will only take a month or two to get a new bylaw ready for review. It will then be dependent upon when the next town meeting is. I know that the plans are to have a special town meeting in the fall to address some other issues. It will be up to the Board of Selectmen to choose whether they want to add this to it or whether we have to wait till May of 2023.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Carol. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, let's move to a vote. If you're in favor of dismissal, you'll be placed. I'm sorry? Somebody in the middle here? Okay, sir, could you come up to the microphone, please? Thank you.
Sean Goldstein, 8 Partridge Hill. I'm struggling to say this in a neighborly way, but it sounds like you've just summarized 3 years that it's taken to get nowhere, and now it only takes a month to actually iron out, is it 7 sentences, 3 paragraphs?
I'm sorry?
A couple of sentences. I'm struggling to understand that.
Carol, would you like to respond to that?
And I do mean the question respectfully.
No, I appreciate that. So, as I said before, yes, it has been 3 years, and it's, I don't think there's any group more frustrated than the Planning Board on this. The first year was delayed because of COVID. That was a townwide decision by leadership to reduce drastically the number of articles at town meetings, so there was nothing we could do about that. 2021 was a very unfortunate technological problem with Zoom. And because of a zoning bylaw requirement that you have a public meeting within a certain period of time with a certain amount of notice to the public, the timing did not work out. So by not having that meeting that we had scheduled because of a Zoom problem, we just had absolutely no flexibility to have another public hearing. And by not being able to have a public hearing, we therefore could not vote at town meeting. So that brings us to year 3. Which is, as I said, a process that fell short. So we have the basis, a good basis of an article. We know what most of the issues are, and we think that with a little bit of attention and legal review and and working with some other organizations in Dover, boards and committees, that it should not take us long to have a bylaw that meets our standards for presentation to town meeting.
Thank you, Carol. Sir? No further questions? Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, then we'll now move to a vote. Yes, sir. If you could come up to the microphone, please. Any of these will do, Craig, whichever one. Just state your name and address, please. Yes, that's fine.
My name is Craig Rafter, 45 Miller Hill. When this gets all ironed out, who will be the granting authority for the permit?
Okay.
The planning board or the ZBA?
Carol, could you
Zoning
respond to
board.
that?
Sure. Thank you, Craig. That's one of the issues that we're going to be discussing, and rest assured that when it does come to town meeting, that answer will be resolved and will be agreed to by all involved.
Thank you. Craig, any further questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to a vote to dismiss the article. All those in favor, press 1. All those opposed, press 2. You may vote now. Motion carries 168 to 27. Okay, so now we have dismissed Articles 19 and Article 20. So we're now going to move to a consideration of Articles 21 and 22. We have been asked to consider Article 22 first, since it is a definitional article, and then we'll move to Article 21. So we're going to start with Article 22, which begins on pages 57 to 58. It carries over to page 58 of your blue book. If I could ask Mr. Andrews to make a motion with respect to Article 22.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town amend zoning bylaw section 185-5 definitions to include terms not defined in the bylaws, to clarify measurements for dimensional requirements, and to define specific commercial uses, all in accordance with the text set forth in the handout distributed at tonight's town meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to amend the definition section of the zoning bylaw. This is going to require a 2/3 vote, and I'll now turn to Mr. Motley from the Planning Board to explain the article. Mr. Motley, state your address, please, sir.
Probably say that again, please. Maybe I'll use this one.
What is that? Well, you certainly have an interest, Mr. Motley. Very good. No, you're going to have to switch.
How is this? Is that better? How's this? Okay, great. Hopefully you can hear me all right. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good evening, everybody.
Louder.
Okay. All right, I'll try and do that. Good evening. As was stated earlier, the background to updating the zoning definitions is an effort to provide some greater clarity and guidance to help enforce some of the town's existing zoning bylaws. The issue in speaking with the town officials and the residents here in Dover is that certain bylaws do not adequately define some of the basic components of land use and certain dimensional requirements on matters such as building height, setbacks, lot coverage, or how they are determined. Further, they don't provide appropriate scale for commercial uses to ensure that they are appropriately sized for the town of Dover. These ambiguities have been frustrating both for town officials as well as for many of the town residents. So the solution is that we are attempting to update the language where needed in the bylaws. It's very important to note here that by clarifying these definitions, it's not that we are changing or altering any of the language, but rather it's an attempt to further clarify and again to eliminate some of these current ambiguities that residents and town officials are coping with. The proposed changes are consistent with what already exists in other towns, consistent with also in size and character with Dover. Next slide, please. Thank you. So these clarifications are pertaining to uses specifically referenced, including accessory, business, office, professional, craft, retail, production. You can see the gamut of these different uses. Definitions relating to the dimensional requirements such as average finished grade, building height, light, lot coverage, setbacks, etc. And again, it provides some general terms as it relates to driveway, historic properties, non-conforming lots, non-conforming uses, parking spaces, street subdivisions. Next slide, please. So the revisional uses, so there are numerous types of commercial uses that are provided that I referenced. The new definitions better differentiate some of the operating characteristics of each of these particular uses. It also addresses specifically residential uses, accessory apartments, as I mentioned, dwelling. Simply put, we're just, as I said, trying to provide the greater clarity that's much needed. Next slide, please. Again, these also speak to some of the dimensional requirements that are being referenced here. So it provides clarity as to what is average, things such as average finished grade, building height, gross floor areas, those types of more very, very particular aspects relating to building and zoning codes. I think that is the scope of what is outlined in Article 22. And I should note also that as you had come in this evening, there were some further revisions that were made to Article 22 that were available on the table as you came in. And so the real details of each of these specifics are further highlighted on the pages of that handout, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Motley. Are there any questions or discussion? In particular, questions for Mr. Motley while he's here at the microphone that's now functioning? No questions? Any comments? Okay, this is a two-thirds vote. So if you're in favor of the motion, you'll be pressing 1 for yes. If you're opposed, you'll be pressing 2 for no. And you may vote now, Jessica? You may vote now. Thank you. The motion carries by more than two-thirds, 154 in favor, 34 opposed. Thank you, Mr. Motley. We now move back to Article 21, which is on page 57 of your blue book, and it deals with the modernization of the table of uses. Mr. Andrews, can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town amend the zoning bylaw, Chapter 185, by amending Section 185-9, Table of Uses, in accordance with the text set forth in the handout distributed at tonight's town meeting.
Thank you, sir. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. Mr. Motley, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much. Again, much like what we were discussing in the definitions, this attempt by the updating and modernization of the table of uses is really just to bring the language more current and up to date, more relevant to the uses that we're seeing here in the town. So I should also note that if you're working from the blue book that you received by the mail on page 757, there was a significant revision relative to the granting authority for special permits, which has been struck, so that no longer is applying here. As you look at the background, again, I wanted just to give you a little bit of a background as to really what the intent here, and hoping that this would be helpful understanding what the issue is. So currently in Dover, there are 6 different zoning districts. We have residential, we have business, we have manufacturing, we have medical, professional, we have official or open space, and we have conservancy. The Article 21 of the bylaws addresses what is called these tables of uses, and there are different land uses that are permitted here in the town. Currently, there are 4, of which there is residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional. And per the existing bylaws, there are 3 authorizations that can be granted. That which is allowed, subject to a permit, what is permitted, which is allowed but subject to a special permit, which is issued by a granting, currently is granted pursuant to the zoning bylaws, which are established by the ZBA, and then those which are prohibited. So those are sort of the 3 different types of authorizations. Next slide, please. So here are the uses and the summary of the proposed clarifications. For commercial uses, to require a special permit, which would give the town the authority to review and, of course, residents the opportunity to provide input, proposed uses when one or more of the following would exist. Proposed retail use, which is 5,000 square feet or greater in gross floor area, or formula-based businesses, which essentially is a definition of what it would be a chain or retail, a national chain, or a chain that would consist of more than 10 stores. It also, again, goes back to the other point of just updating some of the outdated language. So the reference to shop of carpenters, painters, printers, and similar craftsmen is to be replaced with craft retail and production shop. And then provide more clarity to business or professional as opposed to a medical professional, to draw a more clarity in that distinction. And then also would prohibit the construction of airports or landing strips subject to special permit. And then lastly, short-term rentals. Next slide, please. So again, the revisions would be for uses in 21, retail services would require a special permit for uses that are 5,000 or larger, 5,000 square feet larger, and for chain retail. So think of a Domino's Pizza coming into town, or Store 24. In order for that to be approved, they would have to come in and file for a special permit before the town. As opposed to previously, there was no requirement whatsoever that they would be required to do so. It was just a sub-function of site plan review. Use 24, craft shop. Again, this is just a clarification, updating of the language from to a craft retail and production. Use 27, this is again attempt to make the distinction, as I said earlier, between a medical professional building as opposed to professional offices where you might have lawyers, architects, etc. And then use 37, currently it allows for situations where there is a permitted use for more than one use on a property. Think, for example, office space on the second floor, retail on the first floor. Next slide, please. And again, the prohibition and the requirement for a special permit as it relates to airports and landing strips. These are essentially the proposed changes as it relates to Article 21.
Thank you, Mr. Motley. Are there any questions or discussion? Yes, ma'am, could you come down?
Hi, Amelia Slosby, Normandy Road. I was just curious on number 27 why veterinary services are excluded. Is that another town ordinance, or I just was wondering why that was called out now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, great question. I think that I think the thought being is that the definition here as it related to medical was specific to people as opposed to animals. That was the distinction that was trying to be drawn.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, comments? Okay, let's now move to a vote. All in favor of the article, you'll be pressing 1 for yes. If you're opposed, you'll be pressing 2 for no. And this is a 2/3 vote. You may vote now. Motion carries by more than 2/3, 174 to 25. Okay, we're now going to be moving ahead to Article 24, which is on page 58 of your blue book. It deals with an amendment to Wetlands Protection Bylaw. Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town amend the Dover General Bylaws, Chapter 181, Dover Wetlands Protection, in accordance with the text on file and the office of the town clerk.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded with respect to amendment to the Wetlands Protection Bylaw. Ma'am, would you like to state your name?
Yeah, sure. Christy Violin, 16 Main Street.
Okay.
Hi, I'm here on behalf of the Conservation Commission. I'm one of the commission members, and what we're proposing is amendments to our current wetland bylaws in two different ways. The first is to expand our current regulatory buffer zone from 100 feet to 150 feet. This does not prohibit work within the buffer zone. We already have jurisdictional statutes closer to wetland resources that govern those things a little bit more in depth. This just further initiates review a little further away from the wetland resource. Secondly, it removes a cap on outside, turn this so I can see. This removes a cap on outside consultant permit review fees. So currently what we have is a $5,000 cap that applicants are allowed to pay up until if we need to hire outside consultants in our review of proposed projects. So this does not include monies paid to our conservation consultant, Janet Bowser. It's if we have to hire, for example, an additional wetland specialist. This particular statute really only comes into play for complex projects and subdivisions. I've been on the Conservation Commission since I moved to Dover about 4 years ago, and in reviewing hundreds of projects, I think the $5,000 cap has been reached maybe twice in that time. And really what it does is it incentivizes applicants to develop coherent, complete plans before coming to us. Those two couple of projects that overwent that $5,000 value really were those where there was a lot of back and forth with the applicant over what they were proposing, needing to get information from them, and so it was a continuous back and forth requiring more outside consultant time. And this particular statute provides consistency with other town boards and their lack of a cap when engaging outside consultants. Next slide. So I just want to quickly go over the wetland resources that the Conservation Commission is responsible for governing, why they're important, and what this change in the regulatory bylaw will mean for property owners within Dover. So wetlands are critical in maintaining our freshwater resources. Both they improve water quality, they recharge groundwater and aquifers. This is really important as we're a town that's 2/3 on wells and only about 30% municipal. And this also is important for protecting recreationally important bodies of water. For example, those of you who like to fish in Trout Brook, the wetland resources that we're charged with protecting are those that ultimately feed into Trout Brook or the Charles River, and which are also water bodies that we're tasked with protecting. Wetlands have unique plant and animal communities, so they provide critical habitat and biodiversity. So animals and plants that you don't find anywhere else are plants you might find in wetlands. So they're worthy of protection in and of themselves, not just because of what they can provide to us. And what they do provide, in addition to helping us protect and manage our water resources, is flood protection in upland areas by having healthy wetlands that can access upland areas during times of heavy precipitation. Those areas absorb flooding and protect our homes and our lots. Next slide. All right, so why increase the wetland buffer zone from 100 feet to 150 feet? There's a couple of reasons. 150 feet seems to be the scientifically established minimum to provide protection for critical wetland functions and climate resiliency. I was emailing a little bit back and forth with Jerry Clark from Board of Health. We're currently seeing a 10-plus year decline in increase in depth to groundwater, so groundwater is actually getting further from the surface. We've seen a lot more well failure applications come in front of us. As the climate changes and climate becomes less stable and climate warms, we expect there to be more pronounced rainstorms of higher frequency, higher intensity. And so essentially, providing climate resiliency is what allows us to sort of buffer against these both short and long-term changes to our water resources. And development within Dover has in some ways impaired our ability to protect wetland resources. We've seen streams that used to flow continuously being changed to intermittent streams. Again, well failures are becoming a little bit more commonplace, especially with shallow wells that are close to wetlands themselves. And in a lot of ways, Dover is lagging a little bit in our statutes that protect our water resources. So at least 11 similar towns have buffer zones that extend at least to 150 feet. Brookline, Watertown both have 150-foot buffer zones. Wellesley has a 250-foot buffer zone for all wetland resources. And so increasing to 150 feet is really kind of keeping in line with other towns that like to be at the forefront of environmental and wetland protection. Next slide. So what are the impacts of these amendments? There's a few things it will do and a few things that it won't, and I think this is what's most important to all of you. So we'll provide better protection, like I said, of both surface and subsurface water resources. So water quality, water quantity, should provide well protection, groundwater protection, things like that. Importantly, it will further protect tree cover by curbing excessive tree cutting within the expanded buffer. So if any of you have come before us with a project, the wetland buffer provides for a maximum of 50% of tree removal within the buffer. So by extending that buffer zone from 150 feet to 100 feet to 150 feet of a wetland resource, we're increasing the amount of space that we mandate tree cover. So we're decreasing the amount of land that can be sort of clear cut up to the buffer, up to a wetland resource. And that's really important, again, for climate resiliency, but it's also important for protecting the wetland resource itself from runoff, from erosion, and from things like that. It will facilitate thoughtful design decisions. So what is important to realize is that this next 50 feet from 150-foot buffer to 150-foot buffer doesn't prevent development of that buffer zone. What it does say is that if you want to work on your property or develop your property within that 150-foot buffer zone, you need to come before the Conservation Commission. You need to come to an open meeting, present your plans, and have them discussed by the commission with the input from other citizens. So we hope that we think that will facilitate residents, developers, and everyone who wants to work in the buffer zone with coming up with more environmentally sensitive designs. And again, this will make it consistent with other bylaws and regulations. Next slide. Okay, so importantly, that will not prevent residents from building in their property in the outland wetland buffer. Two things to highlight here. Waivers are available for previously developed lots, so we have a lot of lots that are almost entirely within the buffer zone. Those lots, it's easy to come before us with an application and get permission with designs to redevelop your property. And so these bylaw amendments will primarily affect new construction on what are already marginally developable lots, so lots that already contain a lot of wetland, but as of now are undeveloped. And so ultimately, we hope this will protect Dover's open space and its rural character.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments with respect to this? Yes, sir, why don't you come up here to the microphone?
So Bradley Pastor, 5 Conrick. So I view it as there's really two parts of the article.
Yeah.
So one is about changing the buffer zone, which I view as a separate from changing the fees.
Yep.
So my question is specific to the fees.
Sure.
You indicate that there's other towns. What other towns have this structure?
Oh, so within and if I misspeak, Janet or Amy will correct me, but within our town, if other boards, so planning or zoning, need to engage an outside consultant, they don't cap the fee that an applicant is responsible for at $5,000, but conservation does. Yes? Okay. So what we want to do is remove that fee to be more in line with the other boards in town. And like I said, I'm relatively new to the town. My background is in aquatic biology. I've seen 2 projects where that fee has been met. So for example, $5,000 would cover roughly 33 hours of our usual wetland consultant when we feel like we need outside wetland expertise. So any individual homeowner who comes in front of us with a plan won't ever reach that $5,000 cap. So it's really only subdivisions and other complex projects.
So
you may follow up. Go ahead.
Thank you. So if no one has ever hit that except for 2 projects, why does the town now feel the need to put in place something that could create uncapped costs to the town when no other, hold on.
No, I'm sorry. No.
Please. When no other towns outside, Wellesley, Needham, et cetera, have that structure in place. And then with that, it doesn't go to a town employee, it goes to an outside contractor whose hourly fees are higher than the market rate if you hired your own consultant. And we also have someone on staff who used to have this, who we now pay a salary who doesn't do this role. So
right.
In the interest of good financial stewardship, I don't understand the relationship in why a fee structure is tied to something about protecting the wetlands, which seems reasonable. So it feels to me as a homeowner in the town, I'd like to support protecting our wetlands, our environment, but I'd also like to have visibility into what could be uncapped fees at an hourly rate higher than market that no other town does, when we also have someone on staff who could do this. That doesn't seem good stewardship to me.
Getting a little back up here, thankfully.
Yeah,
I'll let them jump in because I'm a little less familiar with the regulations than they are.
Same as me.
So the $5,000 cap essentially means that if an applicant comes and our consultant costs more than $5,000, they only have to pay the $5,000, after which we as a town are responsible for any overages. So in that sense, if an applicant brings forth to us a proposal that is well thought out and works well within our regulations, then that overage should never happen. If you're coming to us with a project that's so large in scope or so tricky that it's going to require more than, for example, our wetland consultants 33 hours, then I think it's only responsible for the applicant, who is either the one developing their property for their own use or developing, for example, a subdivision. It's only fair for them to pay the consulting fee, be it $3,000 or $12,000, than it is for us to have to pay the fee as a town. So they would be, for example, in that case, they would pay $5,000, we would pay the extra $7,000 out of a town budget.
Right, so thank you, but my understanding is for subdivisions commercial, that goes out to bid in RFP, so that is a separate thing from a resident wanting to do a swing set in their yard.
Okay, so it says, other towns and Dover are under Massachusetts Chapter 44, Section 536, with no cap on consultant fees. So other towns don't actually cap consultant fees, and within Dover, no other boards cap consultant fees.
No, the question was specific around hiring outside
Oh, I'm sorry.
person.
I'm sorry. I was answering the last question.
Who we haven't gone out to bid around a fee that is higher than market rate, when we also have an employee for the town that used to fill this role.
Well,
So I understand I understand
yeah.
that I'm layering a couple questions in here.
Right,
I'm
so
trying
let
to
me
get at
see
the
if I
root.
can answer this one correctly. So we retain Ms. Bowser to review our wetland applications, make best practice recommendations to us. But there are times where we require, for example, an unbiased third party. In that situation, the Conservation Commission is free to choose who we wish to contract with. It doesn't have to be bid.
Well, let me be blunt. Why do we have Laurie on payroll? We used to do
Oh,
this, and now we have to pay
Lori's
for Janet.
Lori's our admin. So Lori, she does.
Well, wait a minute.
No.
Let her answer the question, then you can ask
Thank
her,
you.
okay?
Sorry about that.
No, Lori has never served in a wetland expert capacity. Lori has always been our administrator. She's the one who makes sure all of our files, paperwork, et cetera, is in order. We have always engaged, at least in my 4 years, have always engaged Janet as our wetland consultant, as our bylaw wetland consultant. She used to do it for Wellesley, now she does it for Dover. But if you're an applicant, we can't have, sometimes we need an outside party to weigh in unbiasedly on projects.
And the homeowners have to pay Janet.
No,
the
the town.
Went through this. We had to cut a check to the town.
Wait a minute. Go ahead.
No, homeowners,
Please, one question at a time, and please let the witness respond to the question. Thank you.
Witness.
Uh-oh.
Sorry about that.
So, no, Janet is paid by the town. So when Janet reviews projects for us, right, she is paid by the town. If we need to hire an outside consultant for further review, then that's what comes to a homeowner or a developer. Now, it doesn't, all this is saying is that if you want to do a complex project that requires extensive review, that's going to take hours, many hours of time, that the taxpayer should not be responsible for overages. Whether or not, the structure for hiring an outside consultant is already in place. This is a question of capping the fee, whether or not there should be a fee cap at $5,000 to the applicant, at which point past which point the town absorbs the cost.
So thank you. Appreciate you walking me through that. My recommendation would be to separate out the two amendments. To separate out fee structure. I don't know if it's something you can do at a town meeting. The question around the fees from the question of the buffer, and then I'll sit down. So thank you for walking me through that.
Okay, sir, if you want to make an amendment to this, if you could put it in writing,
okay.
and then bring it up to town council. And why don't you come up here now and you can talk to town council while we're continuing with questions. And then if you want to make a motion, and if somebody seconds it, we can move to that amendment. Okay, next person who has questions, Mr. Clark, could you state your name and address, please?
John Kuby, 11 Stagecoach Lane. I appreciate your work on the conservation. You had talked about wells drying up. There's a lot more wells going in, and people are using them for irrigation.
Okay.
So that uses a lot more water than would just a regular household. That has a lot to do with the wells drying up. My project was delayed, a good 2 months when I put my well in. And I just don't understand how you can say that you can still do your projects, but you come to us first for approval. So you can reject a project.
If I have your question correct, if you're talking specifically about a well project, we have to permit any.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm talking about
we don't permit wells. That's Board of Health. But if a well's to be dug within the wetland jurisdictional area, then it does come before us. But we pretty much approve it and send you to Board of Health.
All right, well, mine got delayed by 2 months. So
I
with
would
you
s-
moving that further out, that is from 100 to 150 feet, that could delay it even more.
I think this is, my sense is that this is a Board of Health question
No,
without.
it was to do
Was
with-
it delayed
with
by
the
us?
conservation. Yeah, it was to
Okay.
do with conservation. That's why it was delayed.
Do you know this, do you remember the specifics about, like, why it was delayed?
This is not germane at all.
Yeah, well, you know, I turned in all of the forms and the paperwork, and then they came back and said, okay, well, you know, this isn't what we approved, and it was what they approved.
Okay, I think we should move on. This has already been
I'm sorry, I
asked.
can't be of more help in this particular instance, I'm sorry.
She's advised that it's a Board of Health issue, sir.
It wasn't a
so-
Board of Health issue, it was
Well, you
conservation.
made your point. Thank you, sir. If I could move on to the next person, thank you.
Well, the last person talked for 10, 15 minutes.
Because he was asking different questions. You've asked the
All right,
same
well,
question.
can I just state that this is Dover, this isn't Wellesley, this isn't Weston. This is why people want to live here, is because it's not Wellesley and it's not Weston.
Right, and we're hoping, we think that
Don't-
increasing,
okay,
no,
go ahead.
I'd like to address your concerns. Increasing the buffer jurisdictional area actually helps us to keep Dover like Dover and not Weston and Wellesley. As far as well permits are concerned, my sense is that any delay of your permit was not related to the buffer width itself or the jurisdictional area. Without knowing the specifics, I couldn't opine further, but a well that would have been allowed at 150 feet before it was a wetland jurisdictional area would still be allowed after it was a wetland jurisdictional area.
So I'm just saying that it was delayed because of conservation.
Okay, point's been made. Sit
Yeah,
down,
yeah.
please. Thank you. Next.
Thank you, everyone. Josh Fredinho from Stagecoach Lane.
Yep.
Thank you for your presentation. I'd like to just start out with my own bias of having been a homeowner in Dover for 4 years, having done the multi-million-dollar investment in this dream house, or the house that I see growing up with my kids, and gradually adding to it with an understanding that I could actually use the property without any constraints whatsoever. The proposed increase to 150 feet will now actually put my whole lawn in my backyard inside the wetland. So it completely changes the perspective as to when I made my initial investment decision, which would have been different had I known this information ahead of time. Now, with that bias introduced, I would also like to bring to our attention something interesting, which was 82% here just voted for Article 22 to increase the definitions such that we actually made better decisions. It was clearer about the information that we were being presented. And in this specific article, both aspects of it, you have reasonable fees, which by definition is not really a clear definition, so that's one. And then the second one on your slide, it had, well, this will only be applied primarily to new construction. But I don't see that language in your article. So just like the gentleman before me, I would like to make whatever actual process I need to in order to bring to bear this definition in the inception of this article, such that I do not find myself in 2 years or whenever saying, you know, at first you had said that it was primarily new construction, but now I'm actually being caught out here, so let's just get it right the first time.
I think
Okay,
those,
so you would like to make an amendment, sir?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you,
well,
But
maybe I
she
could
might
answer,
wanna-
I could speak to a
Yeah,
couple of his
sure.
other points first. I think those are valid concerns. As far as being told that you could develop all of your property, the wetland bylaws are on file with the town of Dover, and so when you purchase a property, understanding what's on that property and what restrictions may come with it, you know, that comes to you as a home buyer. Now, I can break down for you what our buffer zone restrictions currently are. So if you have pretty much any kind of wetland resource in your backyard, currently within our bylaw, the first 50 feet is what we call a no-touch zone. The next 70 foot, the next 20 foot for a total of 70 feet is no structure. So in the first 50 feet, you're really not allowed to do anything. In the next 20 feet, there's some activities you can engage in, lawn, et cetera, but we're not going to let you put up a fence, or we're not going to let you build a pool. Fences are maybe not the greatest example. We're not going to let you put in a pool within those 20 feet, or a shed or a garage or any sort of structure. And that really comes down to wetland protection and introducing impervious surface within the buffer zone that prevents basically wetland recharge. Now, currently, the last 30 feet are really governed right now, mostly deal with tree protection. So within that last 30 feet, for your total of 100 feet, the primary restriction is in how many trees you're really allowed to cut down. So the tree cover requirements are 50%. And sometimes waivers, I kind of ran out of time, I ran a little bit long, so waivers are typically available for homes that are already built, and homes such as yours on Stagecoach that finds itself largely within a wetland resource. If you go up along Sterling or any of the properties up off in the neighborhood up off Glen Street, many of them are almost entirely within a wetland buffer. And so we want to work with homeowners. We don't want you to come before us and say no. And there are people here who could really attest to the fact that sometimes we really bend over backwards to try to say yes. Wait, hold on.
Just have a follow-up.
Yeah, let me finish the first part.
Sure.
So what we want to do with this last 50% is this last 50 feet is a couple of things. We want to bring ourselves in line with more developed communities that already have stricter buffer requirements than we do. For example, Wellesley. We want to increase tree cover and prevent certain activities within that 50 feet that are also damaging to our wetland resources. And so primarily what that means is that when you come before us and you want to clear property to put in a swimming pool in that 50 feet, we're going to say, well, you can't take down more than 50% of the trees. We're not going to tell you you can't build a swimming pool. We're going to say we have restrictions on how this might be used or how we would like you to design it to keep certain landscape features that are helpful for wetlands. So in this case, for the most part, it's tree cover.
Sir, if you could now, we have a lot, no, sorry, we have a lot of other people.
Hold
on, let him-
Sir, I'm
Does
sorry.
anyone want to cede their 2 minutes so I can ask
Sir,
my question? Thank you very much.
Well, no, sir, I'm sorry, you'll have to go.
So that's
and
not
we'll
how
co-
it works?
I'll come back to you. I will come back to you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
We have a lot of people waiting, and we will come back to you.
Hello, Mike Savage. I live on Circle Drive. For those of you who don't know where Circle is, it's off of Playbrook. My wife and I have lived here some 25 years, and we've raised a family. Much of the value of my house and much of the value of the houses in my neighborhood sort of rest in its value as a tear-down and redevelopment project. And while I think your proposals are well-intentioned, I think they're excessive and unnecessary. I took a quick look at some of the neighboring towns. I didn't look at Wellesley. You say they have a 250-foot barrier, but Westwood, Medfield, Sherburne all have 100-foot barriers.
Let me interrupt you, at least with regard to Sherburne, which I think is our closest example. It is 100 foot, but there's no structure or any activity allowed, no structures allowed within the entire 100-foot buffer zone of a wetland resource in Sherburne. So if you're 100 feet within a vernal pool, which most of Sherburne is, you're out of luck.
Thank you for the correction. Nonetheless, while I think it's well-intentioned, I think, and I understand you say that this won't prevent, won't prevent construction within that additional 50 feet that you propose. I think the creation of the additional 50 feet, along with the removal of the cap, which seems to put in a potential unlimited expense on the part of the applicant to try
Only if you go over the $5,000, you're only responsible, it only means you're already responsible for the first $5,000, which
Yes.
really, that should suit everybody.
Who pays the second 5?
The taxpayers. Right now, the taxpayers pay the second 5.
Yeah, but under your proposal.
No, now, the taxpayers pay the second 5. The
Yeah.
proposal is that the applicant would pay the whole 10.
That's
So
my
if-
point. That's my point. My point is that you.
Okay, sir, thank you.
So-
You made your point, and if I could add.
I don't
move on
think
to-
she understands my
No,
point.
I understand
She
your,
understands.
I understand
She
your point, and
understands.
respectfully, you're suggesting that if
keep the
you
cap.
as, pardon?
We keep the cap.
So you're suggesting that you as an applicant would like to tear down your home and build a much larger one, and
I'm
back
sorry.
and forth?
Please, this has been
Can I-
asked. We have
I'd
to
like
move,
s-
we have to move on to the next question.
Well,
So-
last 3
No,
words.
no,
I
sir.
respectfully
hold on.
ask my town people
Sir,
to reject this. I'll sit down.
All right, next. We need other people other
Matt
people are
Stone.
waiting. We need to let them ask their
Yeah,
questions.
Matt Stone with 8 Stagecoach Lane. I just have a quick one because everyone's obviously busy here. In your presentation, you said at least 11 towns have greater than 100 feet. So just to put that in context for all of
Yes, I know.
Massachusetts.
Yep.
We have
300 and-
315.
Yep, 315.
Okay, so
Yep.
you're saying you want to improve that to greater than 97% of all the other towns in Massachusetts?
Yes.
Okay. That seems excessive to me, but I just wanted to put in context for everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from people in the audience who wanted to ask who can't come up to the microphone? No? Okay. I'm sorry? Okay, question in the cafeteria.
Lee Jeffries, 9 Meeting House Hill Road. Can we move the question?
Okay, a motion has been made. Motion has been made to move the question. This is not a debatable question, so if there's a second, we'll move directly to a vote on moving the question. Do I have a second? Okay, motion has been seconded, so I'll now move to a vote on moving the question. Jessica, when you tell me when you're ready. If you're in favor of moving the question, press 1 for yes. Move the question means that we'll then move directly to a vote on the article. The question, the yes vote means that we will stop debate and move directly to vote on the article. A no vote means that you want to continue discussion. Okay, so all those in favor of terminating discussion and moving to a vote, you'll press 1 for yes. Opposed, press 2 for no. You may vote now. Motion carries to move the question. We'll now move directly to voting on the article. This is a majority vote. All those if you're in favor of the amendment proposed by the Conservation Commission, you'll be pressing 1 for yes. I'm sorry? The motion was not made or seconded yet on your motion. We didn't have the motion. It does. The rebuttal presentation was, you didn't come forward. I think that I'm sorry, we're going to have to, the question has been moved. We have to vote. I'm sorry, but you didn't come up. I'm sorry. There's been plenty of time for debate. We've been talking about this for 40 minutes. No, well, let me call attention to page 5 of the Blue Book. A motion for reconsideration can be made for any article that we vote on. So this is not necessarily the end of the story. Page 5, motion to reconsider. So why don't we take a vote now and get a sense for what the lay of the land is, and then you can always make a motion to reconsider, and we'll vote on the motion to reconsider, and we'll continue discussion. It's already 9:45. We've been talking for 45 minutes. No, I'm sorry, the motion has been made. The motion has been made. We have to move to the vote. I'm sorry. All right, so if you're in favor of this article, the amendment that's proposed, you're going to vote, press 1 for yes. If you're opposed, you'll press 2 for no. You may vote now. So the motion is, does not carry, 114 to 79. Okay, now remember, this can come up for reconsideration. If a motion is made for reconsideration within 30 minutes, it would be a majority vote to reconsider. If it's made beyond 30 minutes, it's a 2/3 vote. It's described on page 5 of the Blue Book. Now, we will move to Article 26. I'm sorry, that was dismissed. Article 25, a motion to create a water use restriction bylaw district. Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town amend the Dover General Bylaws to adopt new Chapter 182 water use restrictions in accordance with the text on file in the office of the town clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Rossetti has seconded. This is a majority vote. It involves creating a water use restriction bylaw. Ms. Hunter?
So I would like to make a short presentation. Do you want me to go up there? Or? Okay. Robin Hunter, 7 High Rock Road. Tonight, I just wanted to make a short presentation about the water bylaw that we are proposing at the Board of Selectmen. So this is really a continuation of all the work that we've done with respect to water and understanding water constraints. So just as a little bit of background, in 2017, we established a Water Resource Committee. That committee did a lot of work, and one of the recommendations that came out of that committee was for us to put in some monitoring wells and also do a hydrology study. So in 2018, town meeting approved that, and I would strongly suggest to everybody we post the results of the water monitoring data on the website, and it's a good, it's a good point of reference to see what's happening to the water table. In 2020, we came back to town meeting, and we asked town meeting to provide us with $200,000 so that we could do a long-range plan, strategic plan for water to really understand what the constraints are, what our water supply is, do we have other options. And we have begun that. We hired a consultant, and there will be a lot of community input as we put together this long-range strategic plan. So this bylaw that we have today before you is just an extension of everything we've done to give us the tools that we need so that we can conserve water. Next slide, please. Why do we need it? Why did we felt strongly that we need it? So in the summer months, we definitely see increases in water usage and the table dropping dramatically. We have also found that residents have to drill deeper when they put in replacement wells. Also, as the water table gets lower, there are increased risks for contamination, and that's been seen by residents that have public water services in Dover, we have seen an increase in contamination in our water. What this bylaw does for the town and the Board of Selectmen is it simply gives us another tool to monitor both the usage in the private and public wells in Dover. Next slide. How's it going to work? It's pretty simple. I think if people live on the Medfield border, you'll see there's signs that go up, and it tells the Medfield residents what the water levels on the town are and how many times a week they can water their lawns. So we're going to do a similar thing here. The Board of Health and the Water Resource Committee have already designed those signs, and it's going to be based upon Massachusetts DEP guidelines. Next slide. There's been a lot of discussion about enforcement and how enforcement may work. Nothing has been decided yet. Once the bylaw is put in place, the Board of Selectmen will put in an enforcement policy. But what we envision is the following. The compliance will be monitored by the DPW, which is our highway department, basically. Our enforcement is going to focus on education first. When there are violations that come to our attention, we're just going to go to the homeowners and let them know, what's going on, what the DEP levels are. This is not meant to be punitive or a revenue item for the town. What we're trying to do here is simply focus on water reduction and consumption. The Water Resource Committee has done a lot of education about this, and basically they have addressed all the low-hanging fruit, and this is just another avenue for us. What we found in our research is towns that put these similar bylaws in place have found a significant reduction in water consumption, and we're trying to do the same. The first tool that we have in preserving water is to reduce our consumption. We don't expect to have 100% compliance. I have the chief sitting next to me, but when I think about enforcement, I think about speeding. We have speed limits. Some people obey the speed limits and others don't, so this is going to be the same kind of thing. But ultimately, reduced consumption will benefit all of us in town. Next slide. Why vote yes? We only have 2 sources of water for all the homes in Dover. Whether you're on a private well or a public well, we are all using the same water. So if you're on colonial or Aquarian water and you have restrictions and your neighbor isn't, we're all getting our water from the same place. We know that groundwater levels are decreasing. We see that from the monitoring wells, especially in the summer months. And this is really a critical aspect to preserving water. So we urge you to vote yes.
Thank you, Ms. Hunter. Are there any questions or discussion? Yes, Mr. Long.
Charlie Long, 121 Walpole Street. Make no mistake, this is an effort to restrict how you can use your own well water. That's what this is all about. Now, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on these silly studies, and the study about the amount of water you should be using relates to somebody's idea at the state level of how much water you really ought to use. It has nothing to do with how much water is available in Dover. You can look around you, and Dover has enough water for a town of 10 or 20 or 100 times the size of Dover. We're soaking in water, and we're going to continue to be soaking in water. Look at the South Natick Dam sometime in the spring. Look at that enormous amount of good, clean, fresh water that's going right out into the ocean. We have plenty of water. Now, sure, in the summertime, it gets a little dry. Then it comes back. And that's always the way it's been, and it's the way it's going to continue to be. We don't have any water shortage. We have a bunch of people at the state level who are trying to establish some kind of standard for water use. Now, that may apply to other places, but it sure shouldn't apply to Dover. So make no mistake, this is about telling you what you can do with your own well water, and I suggest you vote no.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Yes, ma'am?
I'm Margot Yee. I live at 6 Dancer Farm Drive. I just want to say that there is sometimes a water shortage repeatedly through the summer. If I get up in the morning at about, somewhere between 5:30 and 6:30 or 7, I can go to my taps and get no water out of my taps for a little while because too many sprinkler systems are running all over town all at the same time, and there's no water to be had. And you have to wait another 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, until you can actually take a shower or turn the water tap on and get water for breakfast. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Yes, sir?
Evening. I'm Alex Parker, 58 Hartford Street. Just mention that I used to live in Natick, lived there for a long time. Natick is a town, like many towns around Massachusetts, where just about all the residents are on city water. The city maintains a large well field and provides water for basically all the homes. So the city is able to monitor the health of that well field. When it gets low, all the homes in the town are affected. And in that kind of context, a one-size-fits-all regulation can make sense. As we heard described earlier this evening in Dover, more than 70% of homes are on private wells. Those wells can be drilled to very different depths. Most of them are not shallow wells accessing the immediate surface water. Your neighbor's well could be hundreds of feet deeper than yours, in fact, accessing a different layer of the aquifer entirely. So I don't think a one-size-fits-all regulation really makes sense in the context of Dover, where everybody's home is a little bit different. On top of that, if you look back, and I was looking at this with my friend David just the other day at the USGS monitoring well for Dover, we looked at the data back to 1964, and in fact, although there's year-to-year variation in the groundwater level based on variation in rainfall, the average level has actually been rising slightly since 1964 through 2020, the most recent data that were reported. In fact, this is interesting because this is in the context of a doubling of Dover's population over those years, which means even though we've increased the usage by doubling the population of the town, groundwater hasn't budged. And I think this is consistent with the first gentleman's comment that there's more than enough water present for Dover residents to use it. And we don't really need a one-size-fits-all regulation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Yes, Justine.
So I would just like to say that looking at the data, I see something very different. The water table in Dover has reduced over the years, especially if you look at the data from 1968 to 2018. So I beg to differ with you. We are all accessing our water from the exact same place, and we are seeing a decrease in the water table.
I'm in favor of this article. I'm on the Water Committee.
Justine, could you state your name and address?
I'm sorry, Justine King-Uratam, Haven Street, member of the Water Committee under the Dover Board of Health. Yes, Robin's right. We do have a lessening of the water table. I'll give you a personal anecdote first, and I'm sure I'll be cut off before I get to a general one. I've lived here a very long time. When I first moved here as a 29-year-old, literally the shallow well that was outside our porch, I could take off the cap, see the water. Over the last several years, you take off the cap, you cannot see the water. So as that lady said, we did not have water for some time at our house. Our house was built in 1903 in an area gushing supposedly with water. We ended up having to replace our well in 2012. We had to go down 500 feet. We had to frack in order to get enough volume so that our house was worth something. Without water, our houses in this town are worth nothing. This is a very modest proposal. The state has a drought management task force that meets during the summer months. I've attended most of those meetings with the former chairman of the Board of Health, Jerry Clark. They are very concerned throughout the state, I might add, of what's going on with the variability, droughts, followed by intense deluges of water, droughts, deluges of water. So all I can
20
tell
seconds, Justine.
all I can tell you is the whole state is watching this very carefully. We do not, Charlie, have an abundance of water. The Charles River goes dry sometime. I dare you to look at Miller Hill, the pond there. That's the one I'm always checking. And I'm looking over the spillway at the South Natick Dam. There's a connection between the low flow in the Charles River and also what's going under our aquifer. Please vote in favor of this.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Dan Kahn, 33 Tubrek Drive. I read the hydrology report, and I saw that there is indeed seasonal variation in many of the monitoring wells dug, but I did not see any type of pattern over the years. I saw, as you would expect, in the summer the water level dips a couple of feet, and in the winter it recharges. That's how aquifers tend to work. Is there any statistically significant, town-wide, robust data suggesting that we are at risk of running out of water soon?
Robin?
Thank you.
Thank you. Robin?
So we're not at risk of running out of water. What we are seeing is that the water levels don't recharge as quickly as they decrease. And over time, we have seen, if you look at the USGS maps or well data, we have seen a decrease in the overall water table. And Mr. Clark, perhaps you want to talk a little more about that.
Go ahead,
With the
Jerry.
data.
Name and address, Jerry.
I'm Jerry Clark, the current chair of the Board of Health. I've been it for quite some time. I founded the Water Resource Committee and have chaired it. I want to make clear, I am not speaking either for or against this article. I am data-driven. Most people know that. There have been a number of misstatements made. I'd like to correct those. I don't think we have time, but I did, on a quick study, because it came up at 3:30 this afternoon, a quick look at the USGS. I don't know if you can put this in or not. If you can, there's a 2-minute set of graphics.
Sorry, Jerry, you would have had to submit it earlier. We can't do it.
Well,
Can you just summarize the
yeah.
data?
Number one, there is very definitely a pattern that was established some years ago that if you were to come to our meetings, you would see that cycles of precipitation are narrowing. The cycles are occurring more frequently, and the extremes in both directions are getting worse. We have had a drought serious in 2016. We have a drought in 2019, and at 3:30 this afternoon, I got an emergency notice from the state that we're having an emergency meeting on Friday of the Drought Management Task Force to address the fact that all the metrics suggest we're heading into another drought. I've heard the statement that wells don't go dry. I can totally tell you the number of hours I have spent in the past several years dealing with people whose wells have gone dry, whether it has been the older groundwater wells
30 seconds, Jerry.
or others. Wells do go dry. You do have to go deeper. Even fracking can cause the loss of water in other adjacent wells. We've seen that. So there's been a lot of misinformation. We're time limited. I apologize. Again, I am only trying to address the factual information.
Thank you, Jerry. Sir?
Mr. Moderator, Boynton Glidden, 55 Pine Street. I want to know the time limit on Article 24 to reconsider for a simple majority.
Okay. How much time is left on Article 24 for majority vote?
9:42, so
It's been 17 and a half minutes, so you would have 13 more minutes to make the motion if you want the majority vote to reconsider. Beyond that, it would be a 2/3 vote to reconsider.
Right. Well, during that 13 minutes, if we're talking about another article, if I get up at 12 minutes and wave my hand, I'll want to reconsider.
Okay, fine.
But I would like to also make one comment supporting Justine and Jerry Clark. They've done a lot of work on this water levels. And in my own experience, having lived and or worked in Dover since 1946, the water level has definitely gone down in my area of Pine Street. A permanent stream is now an intermittent stream. And streams that I used to catch trout in between Olson's Pond and the present Knollwood dry up. And there's no really answer for it, except that there's many, many more houses. There's 28 more houses between the junction of Pine and Center Street and my house, which is only about 0.4 miles, well, 0.5 miles up Pine Street. So I think the facts speak for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, if there aren't any more questions, we could move to a vote. Any more questions or discussion with respect to this motion? Okay, if you're in favor of the motion, you'll be pressing 1 for yes. If you're opposed, you'll be pressing 2 for no. You may vote now. Motion carries 118 to 69. Now, Mr. Glidden, would you like to make your motion for reconsideration? Oh, no. Where's Bill? Did somebody bring a microphone to Mr. Glidden? Okay, Mr. Glidden has made a motion to reconsider Article 24. This motion is made within 30 minutes of the first vote, so it would be a majority vote that if the majority vote in favor of reconsideration, we will move back for further discussion and reconsideration of that article. Do I hear a second? Second. Okay, motion has been seconded that we reconsider. This is a majority vote. Is there any discussion? Discussion that traditionally in our town has been very brief with respect to reconsideration because the reconsideration will speak for itself. But is there any further thoughts? Yes, sir.
Hi, Mark Howe, 54 Farm Street. In the beginning of the blue book here, number 7, it says speaking at a town meeting. We have been to the, for lack of a better word, rehearsal the other night, and we had 8 minutes scheduled. And so we'd like to have that rebuttal time.
Okay, but the motion that you were going to oppose failed. So you would still like to speak to that? Are you speaking in favor of reconsideration, Mark?
Yeah, we should have our 8 minutes just so everybody is aware of the rebuttal.
Okay, but you realize if reconsideration passes, the vote could change. So you're speaking in favor of that?
No.
Okay, you're not, okay. I just wanted to make sure you understood. Okay, any other comments on reconsideration? Yes.
Valerie Lynn, 14 Haven Terrace. I would encourage people to vote to reconsider. I think that there were some confusing answers to some of the questions, and I think it would be helpful to clarify for some of the people in this room what that article was trying to do.
Okay, thank you. I would now like to move to a vote. This is a majority vote. If you're in favor of reconsideration, you'll be pressing 1 for yes. If you're opposed, press 2 for no. You may vote now. The motion for reconsideration fails. Okay, now we'll move to Article 28. Mr. Stewart has made a citizen's petition to increase membership of the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town authorize and instruct the Board of Selectmen to establish a committee to conduct a study in accordance with the article concerning the town's adopting a 5-member Board of Selectmen structure, and further that $7,500 be transferred from free cash and appropriated to fund this effort.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded for consideration of expanding the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Stewart, you're sponsoring this article. Go ahead.
James Stewart, 260 Dedham Street. This is a motion to put together a committee to study increasing the size of the Board of Selectmen from 3 members to 5 members. Next slide. The issue is that the workload on the 3 selectmen is currently very substantial. We're very appreciative of all the work that they've done and the sacrifices they make with their time and their efforts. But the 3-member board is just not as effective as it could be. It's a challenge to find candidates to run for selectmen, and the function of selectmen in Dover is an important function. Next slide. The issue is partially related to open meeting law. With a 3-member board, it creates some constraints with respect to what they're able to do and how they're able to have discussions, and it limits their effectiveness. Yes, the town may be considering possible governmental changes, such as changing from a town administrator to a town manager, but that's way down the line. But having a 5-person board would enable these things to be discussed openly, considered, and have more people involved in that consideration. In addition, the warrant committee in the Blue Book, the majority opinion has recommended this. Next slide. The rationale is that moving to a 5-person board would preserve the community nature of Dover through increased participation, input, and transparency, debate. It'll create greater efficiency with workload sharing. It will provide for more effective debate, I believe, and it'll make, most importantly, the role of the selectmen to be more appealing because it'll be an easier job to manage, I believe. Next slide. As it says here, I think that the selectmen should be able to, more selectmen will be able to coordinate initiatives and be able to look into things deeper, take care of things and look into things that have been put off for many years. For instance, many towns do decennial, every 10-year bylaw reviews. We've been doing that on an ad hoc basis. If you had more selectmen to do more work, it could actually happen more efficiently, I believe. In addition, more people on the select board could help look into financial projections of the town so we get a better long-term plan of the town's finances. Next slide. Open meeting law is a great law, but it does limit operations when you have a 3-person board. Basically, if two of the 3 members are meeting to discuss something, that is a quorum, and that's not allowed. If you had 5, a quorum would not be with 2 members. This is all good for transparency and good government, but it really stifles the progress. Next slide. Going on to the idea of the quorum, a 5-person board, 2 members could get together as a subcommittee, work offline, and then present their findings and recommendations to the entire board. I believe, again, it'll provide more open dialogue. Next slide. Certainly, the board would still be subject to open meeting law and abide by it. Next slide. This article is to have a study committee put together made up of citizens of the town who have experience working with the town. It would be hiring a consultant. There is a consultant, the Collins Center at UMass is an example of a consultant that's been used to do these kinds of things. The cost would be approximately $7,500, probably less. And the committee would explore the pros, cons, and pathways if it decided to recommend moving to a 5-person board. And hopefully that would be by ATM town meeting 24. Next slide. Other towns have there's 350 odd municipal entities in Massachusetts. Other towns, cities don't really have select boards, but there are approximately 145 towns in Massachusetts that have a 5-member board, 150 have a 3-member board. Smaller towns tend to have 3, larger towns tend to have 5. Next slide. Dover compares itself often to these 10 towns when looking at doing anything. And next slide. This is a list of the number of selectmen that each of those towns has. So you see it's relatively evenly split. Westwood is a big town with only 3, but they have a large staff in their administration. Next slide. This is a graph which shows the population of the town. On the left side, the number of selectmen, there's 3, 5, 7, 9. You can see Dover is sort of right in the top third of the number of towns with 3 selectmen. Next slide. Sherburne voted to move to 5 selectmen from 3 in 2014. It's been positively received, and obviously a study committee would explore this more deeply. Next slide. So in conclusion, I think time is right now to consider the benefits of moving to a 5-person board. It'll help preserve Dover's character, create increased transparency and consideration of initiatives. It'll likely draw in more people to serve as selectmen, and it'll help Dover meet the challenges of the 21st century. Next slide. The town is modernizing its government and is considering various initiatives, but those are several years off, and a 5-person board could help us transition to that and look at that and sort of bring best practice, more thoughts, and also more best practices into the thought. Next slide. That's my presentation. I think I finished within 8 minutes. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Any questions or comments, Mr. Jeffries?
Questions first, then.
Question first, okay. Somebody have their hand up?
In the back. In the way back.
Way back, okay. Andre, can you, okay, over here. Justine, Andre, oh, Justine, Andre will get it. Okay. You're doing fine.
James, I appreciate your article. We talked about it privately. My understanding is there is another board that only has 3 people, too, the Board of Health. Wouldn't this petition address other boards, too, instead of just focusing on the selectmen? So this is a question.
I wasn't thinking about, I've served on the warrant committee for several terms, and I haven't been on in 2 or 3 years. I thought that this was something that should be done for the selectmen. We've discussed it with people. Everybody said that I spoke to said now is not the right time. And I thought now was the right time after many years of delaying it. I hadn't thought about the Board of Health. I heard that there is an issue, and I think learnings from this could be helpful, but this is really just about the selectmen. This isn't about changing the name of the Board of Selectmen to Select Board or any other governmental changes. This is really just a simple, basic thing that I think makes sense, and I didn't really want to expand it by getting many other things involved.
Well, therefore, if I may, I guess I oppose this only because I think we need to take, if we're going to start looking at the violation potentially of open meeting laws, when you only have 3 people, he's right about that. They can't speak one-on-one without violating the open meeting laws. I think we should look, and I believe there's only one other board that's 3. And so therefore, unless you want to amend it, I think I'd vote against it.
Respectfully, Justine, the violation of open meeting laws is not something that we're dealing with the scope. My view is that we'll move to a 5, hopefully, and they will abide by open meeting laws, and you'll have to trust them that they do that. And I would still like to just keep this, because I don't know the facts and circumstances about the Board of Health, and I'd like to keep this just for the selectmen. They are their own entity, and I don't know the dynamics of the Board of Health, but I've studied for many years the dynamics of the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stewart. Mr. Jeffries?
Mr. Moderator, thank you. The Board of Selectmen took no action on this motion for many reasons. I'll address a couple. Bob will address a couple. Robin will address a couple. I would like you just to try and remember back a few hours ago to my opening remarks and the fact that the Boston Globe had named over the most desirable place to live in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They named us for a reason. The Board of Selectmen functions incredibly well. I appreciate Mr. Stewart's attempt, and I would only remind everyone that we took no action on this motion for several reasons. One, we look at modernization efforts, as Mr. Stewart mentioned, every year. We set out clear goals and objectives. We are completely transparent in everything that we do, and we function, as Mr. Stewart mentioned in his presentation, like most of the towns of our size. We function with complete transparency at your service. The last thing I will leave you with is addressing initiatives like this is an ongoing matter. As Mr. Stewart says, it does take time. It is something that is well within our scope, something we understand, something we are paying constant attention to. Bob?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stewart. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I just have a couple of points, really. I point out that sort of the most compelling thing to me was there's a split across the Commonwealth, whether you have a 3 or a 5-person board. So there doesn't seem to be any obvious advantage to either 3 or 5. My personal view, it's not the number, whether it's 3 or 5. I think it's the quality of the candidates that you get, and I think it's the work of the ability of the 3 or the 5 to work together for the common good of the town. My personal view is it's easier to do that with 3 than it is with 5, because sometimes you just come into it, you just have a clash situation. So for every point that James raised, there's a counterpoint. And it's simply not clear what the right number should be. There's a lot of talk about the work of the Board of Selectmen. I will point out that the Board of Selectmen is the executive board of the town, and we oversee a fair amount of work, but we do not so much. Well, you clearly don't do. The work of the town gets done by the employees. And if you look at the town, if you look back at the town has been very thin on employees. So if you want to increase the capacity of work that gets done by the town, you need to increase the number of skilled employees who can actually do that work. A couple of years back, you approved the hiring of a project manager, municipal project manager. We've got an awful lot of projects done since we've hired that person. We've upgraded or added hours to people like this, planning board and some other places, and then you can get work done. It's not the Board of Selectmen. Our job is to set the goals, set the objectives, follow up to make sure that projects get done, that work gets done, and it all meets the standards of the town. So I really don't have. I came to the job in 2018. I was open to 3 or 5. I simply find that working with 3, collaborating with 3, I've talked to people who've had the job in the past. Very few of them support moving from 3. And so when it comes to a vote, I'm going to vote to support 3. Thank you.
Ms. Hunter?
Wanted to make sure everyone was awake still. I wanted to make sure everybody was still awake. It's not about whether 3 or 5. I think what Mr. Stewart is proposing here is at the town's pleasure. If you would like to pay a consultant $7,500 to do a study and determine whether the 3 or 5 makes sense. That's what the proposal is on the table.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or discussion? Ma'am, in the back?
Hi, Amelia Swasby, Normandy Road. I just want to clarify, this is the whole point. It seems like there's a debate, there's a point, there's a counterpoint. Does this study not give the citizens of Dover the information they need to make this decision next year at town meeting?
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Can I respond to that?
I'm sorry?
Can I respond? That was a question. May I respond
Sure.
to it? Yes, it does. And the idea of having a consultant is to make sure that the study is done properly. It's done. We look at all, the people on the committee look at all of the issues that might be involved, and it's for the town to decide. Why not give the town the ability to look at it? It's not a big commitment. And in terms of $7,500, if you're asking 5, 7, 10 people of the town to get together for 10, 20, 30 hours, $7,500 is little money to make sure they're effective and legally, within what they need to do. So that's the answer.
Okay, sir, in the back?
Yes, Jim, I'm Ford Spalding of 5 Hutton Road. As some of you know, I've been involved in the governance of this town for, I think, over 40 years in various capacities. One is a selectman, regional school committee, warrant committee, currently on the Minuteman School Committee. We had 16 people on our committee, and it was chaos. It was absolutely chaos. More is not better. Less is better, as long as the people that are running for selectmen are going into the job because they care about the town of Dover. What I'm concerned about, and I saw this with 16, is if you have 3 people that really care about the town and 1 or 2 that are there for a specific self-interest, it doesn't work. I've seen boards of selectmen in this town that have worked by and large very well. But I've also seen boards of selectmen in this town where there are people that are serving as selectmen are there for their own special interest. Then it doesn't work as well. We are blessed today to have 3 selectmen, in my opinion, that do a terrific job. They care about the town, and I don't think there's any reason why we need to spend $7,500 for a consultant or even a less amount. We have people in this town that can provide that kind of service, and it won't cost anything. We have an administrative assistant who's had experience in other towns. We also can go and talk to Needham. We can go talk to other towns.
30 seconds, Ford.
One of the things that, Jim, you showed is some of the towns that have 5. I've dealt with most of them. I'll take Dover any day. I like 3. I implore the Board of Selectmen to take a look at 5. You can form a committee to do that, but we don't need to spend money on it.
Can I clarify?
Thank you. Go ahead, James, and then...
So the 75 is a maximum amount. It'll probably be less than that, but you need to ask for what is an outside amount and then add a little bit onto it. Secondly, it's really more about getting the pool of selectmen. Yes, we have 3 wonderful selectmen. I don't know if they're always going to be there. They certainly will not always be there. But there will be other ones, and the amount and the burden, we need to increase the attractiveness of this job by spreading out the burden. Right now, in terms of open meeting law, they're only allowed to have conversations, substantive conversations with the town administrator. They can't, outside of Board of Selectmen meetings, which are every 2 weeks. Look at the meetings, look at our town's meetings, look at other towns' meetings with 5. It's just a whole different dynamic, and I think it's worth looking at, and it's worth $7,500 maximum to do it.
Okay, another question, and it's 10:25. We were really worried about whether we were going to have to go to 2 nights. We have a few more articles, so if you like, we can try to push through. What's the sentiment? Would you like to push through? Okay. All right, so if we could move this along. Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
I'm Erica Alders. I'm at 1 Cornell Road. So I have served on town committees for many, many years now on Warren. I'm on the ZBA.
And I know from personal experience about the time commitment. I came to this meeting thinking, of course, we should have 5 selectmen, and I agree with what everyone said about the inclusivity being important, and the applicant pool and the people who want to do it. And speaking for myself, I have 3 small children, I have a full-time job, and my friends in similar positions. We don't have the time to take on the Board of Selectmen, and people like us could if there were 5. And I thought tonight, certainly we'd want to have 5, but if a study is what it takes to open the Board of Selectmen to give access to people in my position and others like me, then I think we should do it.
Okay, thank you. If there, we have one more over here, okay.
Lee Jeffries, can we move the vote?
I'm sorry, what did she say, Ivy? I'll move the question, okay. Motion has been made to move the question. Do we have a second? Okay, as I explained before, when a motion is made, it's non-debatable. We have to go directly to a vote to consider whether we want to end debate or not. If you vote yes in favor of this, debate will stop and we will move directly to vote on the question. If you vote no, we will continue discussion. Jessica, you may vote now. 1 for yes, 2 for no. Okay, the motion carries, so we'll move directly to voting on the article. If you're in favor of funding $7,500 to study expanding the Board of Selectmen to 5 members, you'll be pressing 1 for yes. If you're opposed, you'll be pressing 2 for no. And you may vote now, Jessica? Now. The motion fails 85 to 84. Just a reminder that all these articles can come up for reconsideration until we adjourn the meeting. Okay, now we'll move to Article 29. Iva Hayes is sponsoring an article to install sidewalks. And Iva, are you here? Would you like to come down? First, let me ask the motion to be made, Iva, and then I'll ask you to explain your reasoning. Mr. Andrews, could you make the motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town transfer $250,000 from free cash to construct a sidewalk on Main Street from the intersection of Main Street and Claybrook Road to the intersection of Main Street and Dover Road, and a sidewalk on Dover Road from the intersection of Main Street and Dover Road to the town of Natick Line.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. It's tradition in this town when a citizen sponsors an article that it's the citizen's choice as to whether we continue to consider it or not. Ms. Hayes would like to continue with consideration. Iva, would you like to say a few words in support of your article?
Yes, I'll just explain the 4 reasons for wanting sidewalks on Dover Road.
Iva, you're going to have to talk directly into the microphone.
You're going to speak right into it. Oh, okay. All right. So I have 4 reasons for wanting sidewalks in my neighborhood. I live on 18 Meadowbrook Road, and there are a lot of people that walk in my neighborhood, walking dogs, or elderly people walking in the neighborhood on Dover Road and Main Street. And the reason for requesting them is fourfold. For one, it's the safety of the kids boarding the school bus. If there were sidewalks in our neighborhood, it'd be safer for the kids. This was an argument used by people who live on Glen Street, and they got sidewalks. So I'm hoping that the same reasoning that was used for sidewalks on Glen Street is used for sidewalks on Main Street and Dover Road. There are elderly walkers in the area, there are dog walkers in the area, there are joggers, and I spoke to one new neighbor who has 2 small children. She'd like to push a stroller around the neighborhood. And then it's also dangerous for the drivers. With so many people walking on the street, someone could get hit. And I've spoken to a couple of elderly people that walk in the neighborhood. One of them used a walker after she had a stroke, and she and her husband walk side by side. They're in their late 80s, and they very much like to see sidewalks in the neighborhood so they could walk. And that's my reasoning.
Okay, thank you very much, Iva. Any questions or comments? Yes, ma'am? Bill, if you could bring the microphone to this lady right here in the back row.
Maureen Dilge, Brook Road. Myself and my husband, I believe, are one of the elderly people that Iva is referring to. I'm 76. My husband, who's next to me, is 89. We've lived in town for 35 years, and we have walked these streets for 35 years. We go down Brook Road to Meadowbrook, to Claybrook, to Main Street, to Dover, and back home. It's about a 2-mile walk. In the 35 years we've been walking, we have never had a problem with traffic. It has been it's been safe. So I would like to respectfully request that you turn down this article for $250,000 for sidewalks for a small little corner of town that's really not required. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to vote on this article. It's Article 29. If you're in favor of the proposal that we transfer $250,000 to construct a sidewalk, you'll press 1 for yes. If you're opposed, you'll press 2 for no. You may vote now. Motion does not carry. Oh. I'm sorry? Okay, there's been a motion made for reconsideration. Which article, James? 28. James Stewart has made a motion for reconsideration for his article to increase the Board of Selectmen. That was made within 30 minutes, so it's going to be a majority vote. Are there any brief comments on this before we vote? Okay. James, could you respond to that?
Yes. Hello. Yes, this is for just a study to look at it, the pros and cons. It might turn out that it doesn't make sense for the town, but why not look at it is the thought. It's probably going to be a lot less than $7,500. It's not a commitment to 5.
Okay, let's move to a vote now.
Can I speak to that for a minute?
Mr. Springer?
Is it on? So the Board of Selectmen set annual goals. As part of our fiscal year 23 goals, the Board of Selectmen intend to take a look at the structure of government in the town of Dover, from soup to nuts. And we do think that it would include a look at how we should be managing the town. From my perspective, it makes no sense to do a one-off on one particular board in the town and not take a look at the overall picture of the town. Justine pointed out that the Board of Health has 3 people. We need to step back and make sure that we look strategically at how the town's organized and structured, do it properly, so that as we move further into the 21st century, we do it in a comprehensive, not one-off way. Thank you.
Okay, and I forgot to ask for a second. Is there a second for the motion to reconsider? Yes, okay, gentlemen. Could you just state your name for the record, please? Okay, thank you. So it has been seconded. Okay, as I stated before, traditionally the discussion on a motion for reconsideration is very brief because we will be discussing the article again if the motion passes. So if there is no further questions, one more, gentlemen, yes?
Chris Boland, Tower Drive, and I'm chairman of the Park and Rec 5-member well-oiled machine. And there are massive advantages to a 5-member committee. I can walk out of a meeting with somebody I was just with, have a conversation of a fellow community member that I'm on a commission with. I can't do that if I'm on a 3-person committee. I can call somebody before a meeting. We could talk about something that's going to be on the agenda. I can ask clarification on something in the minutes that maybe I didn't understand. There's just a lot of efficiency. The other thing I would suggest, and I love the 3 selectmen right now, but not one of them has said they are in favor of this. This is proof there's not enough open debate in a 3-member committee. We need 5-member committees. The other thing is, think about earlier tonight. We had a discussion, a very rough discussion about water conservation, right? That can be better managed in a meeting outside of this, so that the town meeting, the annual meeting, is more efficient if there's open debate. Otherwise, the open debate has to happen right here, and it takes till 10:30 and counting. 5 persons a lot more efficient and effective. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, Chris, couldn't 2 people be colluding?
I'm sorry?
Never mind.
Okay, I would now like to move to vote on this, because if it carries, then we can continue the debate. So if you're in favor of reconsidering this article, you'll be pressing 1 for yes. If you're opposed, you'll be pressing 2 for no. You may vote now. The motion carries. Okay, any further questions or comments on the merits of the article? Yes, ma'am. Dr. Peterson.
Kay Peterson, 25 Wilsondale Street. I'm a member of the Board of Health, but I'm not speaking for the board because we haven't discussed this. I would say that having spent 2 years on the Board of Health, I wonder often whether we should have 5 members. I don't know the answer, and I think about it pretty much every week. I would agree that our meetings are often interminable because we can't do work outside the meetings. But I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I think that the Board of Health might learn something from this study, so I would be in support of the study.
Thank you, Doctor. Any further questions or comments before we move to a vote? Okay, if you're in favor of funding a study to expand the Board of Selectmen, you'll be pressing 1 for yes. If you're opposed, you'll be pressing 2 for no. You may vote now. The motion carries. Okay, on to Article 30, transfer from free cash. Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town transfer the sum of $1,600,000 from free cash for the purpose of reducing the fiscal year 23 tax rate, and that the Board of Assessors be authorized to use the same amount to reduce the tax rate for fiscal year 2023.
Okay, do I hear a second, Mr. Rossetti?
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to transfer money from free cash. Article 30, by the way, is on page 62 of your blue book. Mr. Jeffries, would you like to discuss this motion?
Get the wording. There's nothing really to discuss. There's nothing. Mr. Moderator, there's nothing to discuss.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the audience? Okay, let's move directly to a vote then. If you're in favor of transferring from free cash to stabilize the tax rate, you'll be pressing 1 for yes. If you're opposed, you'll be pressing 2 for no. You may vote now. Motion carries. Okay, now we are at the conclusion of our meeting, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Andrews?
Mr. Moderator, I move that this meeting be dissolved.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Have a nice evening.